In the shadow of the Appalachian Mountains, desperation takes many forms. For Elias Blackwood, it manifests as a bottle of whiskey worth more than the woman who stood by him for 15 years. On a bitter winter morning, he brings Martha to the general store with a crude sign around her neck, "Wife for sale." The locals avert their eyes, shame hanging in the air like morning mist. But 10-year-old Samuel Reed doesn't look away. With calloused hands and eyes too old for his face, he approaches the bewildered woman. "I need a mother," he says simply, his voice steady despite the trembling of his chin. Can a boy's courage rewrite the story of two broken souls? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The logging camp buzzes with morning activity as men prepare for the day's work. Elias Blackwood stands tall among them, respected for his skill with an axe and unwavering strength. His calloused hands grip tools with practiced ease as he exchanges good-natured barbs with co-workers. Blackwood, "Try not to outpace everyone today," calls the foreman. "Makes the rest look bad." Elias merely nods, a slight smile beneath his full beard. He doesn't need to boast. His reputation speaks through the stacks of timber bearing his mark. At day's end, when others tire, Elias continues with mechanical precision. The massive pine is nearly through when the unexpected happens. A hidden knot, a slight miscalculation, the saw kicks back violently. Metal tears through denim and flesh, and Elias's leg becomes a river of red against fallen leaves. Men scramble, voices shout, a belt becomes a tourniquet. Through waves of pain, Elias thinks only of Martha waiting at home, dinner growing cold on their modest table. The company doctor speaks in measured tones. "You'll walk again, but logging—" His voice trails off meaningfully. 3 months of bed rest, 6 of recovery. The wages stop after 2 weeks. Company policy. Martha takes in washing, men's clothes for neighbors. Their savings dwindle like autumn leaves from branches. The medicine bottle sits on the bedside table, offering respite from constant pain. When it empties, Elias finds the doctor's refusal intolerable. "Can't keep giving these out, Elias. Too dangerous. Too addictive. The whiskey costs less anyway." It dulls both physical pain and the sharper ache of a proud man rendered useless. Martha says nothing when bottles begin appearing. Understanding this new medicine serves a purpose. By the time Elias regains enough strength to work, positions are filled. Younger men, whole men, have taken his place. The mill offers half wages for sweeping floors. Charity disguised as opportunity. Elias refuses, pride still stronger than practicality. "I won't be anybody's pity case," he tells Martha. Voice hardened by months of forced idleness, their small home, once filled with easy silence and mutual respect, grows heavy with unspoken resentments. Martha's gentle suggestions are met with barbed responses. Elias begins leaving early, returning late, whiskey on his breath, and anger simmering beneath his skin. The first time he raises his hand to Martha, shock freezes them both. Her cheek reddens beneath his palm print as tears well in her eyes. Elias stumbles back, horror momentarily breaking through his haze. "Martha, She simply turns away, shoulders straight despite the trembling of her hands. "Dinner's cold," she says. "I'll heat it up." That night marks a turning point, permission granted to himself to cross boundaries once considered sacred. Each subsequent transgression comes easier than the last. Years pass. The respectful logger disappears entirely beneath layers of bitterness. Their home deteriorates along with their marriage. Martha stops flinching at raised voices, stops hoping for glimpses of the man she married. Winter arrives harsh and unforgiving. The roof leaks, the pantry empties, and Elias's thirst grows relentless. When the last coins are counted and found wanting, his bloodshot eyes fall upon Martha, methodically patching his shirts despite everything. A terrible calculation forms in his mind, her worth measured against the burning in his throat and stomach. He remembers rumors of miners trading wives for supplies during desperate times, stories told as cautionary tales, not instruction manuals. Morning brings clarity without conscience. Elias watches Martha sleeping, mentally assessing her value to strangers. Still healthy enough to work. Still obedient enough to follow orders. Worth at least a month of whiskey, maybe more. Get up, he tells her, voice gravelly from sleep and drink. Put on your good dress. Martha's eyes, once bright with love, now dulled by years of disappointment, search his face for explanation. We're going to town, is all he offers. The sign takes minutes to make, letters crude against splintered wood. He doesn't allow himself to consider the enormity of his moral failing as he ties it around her neck. He cannot afford such reflection. In the cold morning light, Elias Blackwood leads his wife toward town, her breath clouding before her face. His humanity clouded by addiction's relentless demands. Martha stands motionless as strangers' eyes slide away from her shame. The crude sign hangs heavy, but her spine remains straight, dignity her last possession that cannot be bartered away. Behind impassive features, her mind races through memories, searching for the moment her worth became negotiable. Her mother had warned her about men like Elias, not him. Specifically, the kind man who'd once courted her with wildflowers and promises, but men whose strength could curdle into cruelty when life disappointed them. Men who found comfort in bottles rather than the arms of those who loved them. A woman needs steel in her spine, her mother had said, pressing the blue handkerchief into her palm before Martha's wedding day. Something that bends but never breaks. For 15 years Martha had bent. Through the good early days when Elias's laughter came easily and his hands were gentle. Through the accident that took his livelihood and slowly poisoned his spirit. Through the first slap, then the second, then too many to count, she'd maintained their home as it deteriorated around them, patched clothes as relationships frayed beyond repair, prepared meals that went uneaten as whiskey replaced food in Elias's diet. All while something inside her gradually hardened, not into bitterness, but something like the river stones she collected as a girl, smooth, patient, borne by constant pressure. The general store's warmth barely penetrates her thin coat. Martha notices details with strange clarity. Dust motes dancing in winter sunlight, the shopkeeper's averted gaze, women clutching children closer as if poverty might be contagious. Nobody speaks. Nobody intervenes. They've watched her diminishment for years, this final indignity merely its logical conclusion. Martha remembers her wedding day, standing proud in a dress she'd sewn herself, believing in possibility. How young she'd been, 20 and full of hope, despite growing up in hardship. Her father long dead from black lung, absent from the small ceremony. Her mother stoic but approving of Elias, the promising logger with steady work and gentle eyes. He'll provide, her mother had nodded. In the mountains, this was high praise. For a time, he had. Their cabin stayed warm, their table full enough. Martha kept garden, preserved summer's bounty for winter months, maintained order in their modest world. She'd waited for children that never came. A private grief she carried, silently while watching other women's families grow. Perhaps that had been the beginning of Elias's disappointment, her failure to give him sons to carry his name and work alongside him. He never said as much, but she'd caught him watching neighborhood children with peculiar longing before the accident changed everything. The morning he'd fastened the sign around her neck, Martha had felt something shift inside her, not surrender, but a quiet certainty that whatever happened next would require strength her mother would recognize. She'd slipped the faded blue handkerchief into her dress pocket. Touching it now like a talisman, Martha studies Elias as he negotiates with the storekeeper, his hands shaking slightly, eyes darting toward the shelf, where whiskey bottles gleam amber in winter light. She wonders what price he set for her, how many bottles of temporary oblivion she's worth to the man who once promised to cherish her. She feels no hatred, only a profound weariness. This man is as trapped as she is, bound by addiction's chains and pride's stubborn refusal to seek help. In some way she cannot fully articulate, she pities him, even now, even here. The murmurs around her fade to background noise as Martha retreats into the innermost chamber of herself, where dignity remains intact. She will survive this moment as she survived every other hardship. Her mother's daughter, with steel in her spine. The unexpected voice breaks through her thoughts, a child's voice, clear and demanding attention. Martha looks down to meet eyes too old for such a young face. The boy stands with shoulders squared, chin raised in determination that seems familiar somehow. "I need a mother," he says simply, and somewhere deep inside, in a place Martha thought had withered to dust, something responds to this child's raw need. Not maternal instinct exactly, something more elemental. Recognition of another soul accustomed to making do with less than enough. For the first time since entering the store, Martha speaks, her voice rough from disuse but steady. "What's your name, boy?" she asks, voice rough but not unkind. "Samuel Reed. My grandfather's dying. No point sugarcoating facts. I need help." Elias's bloodshot eyes narrow with calculation. "This ain't children's business. Get on now." Samuel stands his ground, hand clutching the wooden fox for courage. "I have money saved up for whoever would help with grandfather." The mention of money catches Elias's attention like a spark to tinder. Samuel sees the man's pupils dilate with interest, the same look foxes get when spotting unguarded chickens. "How much money?" Elias demands. Samuel names a sum that represents everything his family has managed to save, enough for a proper burial with some left over. More than Elias likely expected from a mountain child, judging by his startled expression. "My grandfather needs tending in his final days," Samuel continues, words rehearsed during his long walk to town. "And I need someone after. If your wife needs somewhere to go, I'm offering fair trade." He meets Martha's eyes directly, silently communicating more than his words convey. He sees something flicker there. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of their mutual desperation dressed as choice. The storekeeper clears his throat. "No, see here, let the boy speak," Martha interrupts, her first assertion of will since entering the store. Samuel continues, emboldened. "Our cabin's small but sound. Garden's already planted for spring. Grandfather can teach things worth knowing while he's still able. He doesn't mention Millerville Orphanage or his fear of being taken. Doesn't speak of night terrors that leave him gasping or the loneliness that sits in his chest like stone. Some vulnerabilities remain hidden even in desperate negotiations. Instead, Samuel Reed stands straight back before Martha Blackwood, offering a business arrangement that might save them both, a fox's gambit in a world of wolves. The general store falls silent as Samuel's proposition hangs in the air. The boy removes a worn leather pouch from inside his jacket, coins clinking softly as he holds it up. The sound breaks the stillness like stones disturbing still water. "This is everything we have," Samuel says, his small hand gripping the pouch tightly. "Grandfather says it's enough for his burial and a month's provisions after." Elias's eyes fix on the pouch with naked hunger. His fingers twitch at his sides as he mentally calculates how many bottles this unexpected windfall might purchase. More than he'd hoped to get from Martha. A bitter truth that flashes across his face before he can mask it. "Let me see," he demands, reaching for the money. Samuel steps back, fox clever and wary. "Not until we have an agreement. The storekeeper..." Mr. Abernathy moves from behind his counter, protective instinct finally overcoming his reluctance to intervene. "This has gone far enough," he says, voice carrying the weight of 20 years as town moral authority. "I won't have human trafficking in my establishment, regardless of how it's dressed up." Elias snarls. "Mind your business, Abernathy. This is between me and the boy." "And your wife," Abernathy counters, pointedly addressing Martha directly. "Ma'am, you don't have to go anywhere. We can find another solution." All eyes turn to Martha, who has remained silent throughout the exchange. Something has changed in her demeanor, a subtle straightening of already straight shoulders, a focusing of her gaze. For the first time, she looks directly at her husband without flinching, "What would you have me do, Mr. Abernathy?" she asks quietly. "Return home with him?" She gestures toward Elias without looking at him. "Wait for the next time whiskey runs short." A murmur ripples through the onlookers. Martha's public acknowledgement of her situation strips away the polite fiction the community has maintained, that her bruises come from clumsiness, that Elias's deterioration is a private matter rather than a collective moral failing. "The boy needs help," she continues, turning toward Samuel. "And she pauses, seeming surprised by her own next words. "I need purpose beyond endurance." Samuel nods once, recognizing the truth in her words. They understand each other, these two. The calculations of survival that others might find cold are merely practical to those with limited options. Elias steps forward, abandoning all pretense. "The money! How much exactly?" Samuel names a figure that makes several onlookers gasp. Not a fortune by town standards, but substantial for a mountain family, representing years of careful saving. The sum clearly exceeds Elias's expectations, his eyes widening with fresh greed. "If Martha agrees to help my grandfather and stay on after," Samuel clarifies, "the money is yours." "All of it." Martha studies the boy, seeing beyond his practiced stoicism to the fear beneath. "Your grandfather, how long does he have?" "Dr. Mitchell says maybe a month, less if the cold settles deeper in his chest." She nods, understanding the urgency. "And after?" "What then?" Samuel meets her gaze steadily. "After is for us to decide, not him." He jerks his chin toward Elias. Martha reaches up and unties the degrading sign from around her neck, letting it fall to the floor with quiet finality. The action, simple yet profound, shifts the power in the room. No longer merchandise. She becomes negotiator. "I'll go," she says, "but on my terms." "Not his." She turns to Elias. "The boy's money buys your claim on me, completely. You won't come looking later when it's gone." Elias starts to protest, but Martha continues, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I'll take my mother's dishes and my sewing kit, my winter clothes and the blue quilt. Nothing else." Abernathy clears his throat. "This isn't right." "None of this is right, no," Martha agrees. "But it's what's happening all the same." Samuel carefully counts the coins onto the counter while Abernathy reluctantly records the transaction. In his ledger, an attempt to legitimize what cannot be made legitimate. The storekeeper's hand shakes as he writes, morality warring with pragmatism. When the last coin is counted, Elias snatches them up with indecent haste, barely glancing at Martha, as 15 years of marriage dissolves into the clink of metal against metal. "We'll need supplies," Samuel tells Martha, speaking now as partners in an uncertain venture. "For the journey up," she nods, already mentally cataloguing necessities, lamp oil, coffee, salt. Outside the store windows, snow begins falling in earnest, thick flakes that promise accumulation by nightfall. The mountain trails will be treacherous by dusk. Whatever comes next must happen quickly. Martha feels a strange lightness as she helps Samuel select provisions. Each item chosen represents a small decision made freely, minor autonomies building towards something that might eventually resemble control over her own fate. The journey begins in silence. Martha and Samuel leave town under the community's watchful eyes, their small collection of supplies and personal belongings loaded onto a borrowed handcart. No one offers help or hindrance. The town's collective conscience assuaged by inaction, disguised as respect for personal matters. Elias disappears immediately toward the saloon, the leather pouch clutched in white-knuckled hands, not bothering with goodbyes. Martha watches him go without expression, then reaches into her coat pocket, where the iron key to their cabin rests heavy against her palm. 15 years of marriage reduced to this cold metal token. She considers its weight a moment longer, then deliberately places it on the storekeeper's counter. "Someone might need shelter," she says simply, turning away before Abernathy can respond. The snow falls steadily as they leave town, transforming the familiar landscape into something alien and pristine. Martha finds herself breathing more deeply with each step away from what was once her home. Oxygen reaching places inside her that have been constricted for years. Samuel walks slightly ahead, his small frame bent against the wind, occasionally glancing back to ensure she follows. He navigates with confidence, born from years traversing these mountains, choosing paths Martha wouldn't have noticed without guidance. "It's 3 hours in good weather," he informs her. "Might be longer with snow. We need to reach Devil's Fork before dark." Martha nods, conserving energy for the climb ahead. The handcart grows heavier as snow accumulates, wheels fighting through deepening white. Without discussion, Samuel moves to help her push, his thin shoulders straining against the weight. "I can manage," Martha tells him, noticing his labored breathing. "Together is faster," he replies matter-of-factly. "Grandfather says work shared is work." The practical wisdom reminds Martha this. Child has been raised by an old mountaineer, his vocabulary and thinking shaped by aphorisms and hard-won experience rather than childhood's usual softness. They stop briefly at a natural shelter formed by overhanging rock. Martha unpacks bread and jerky, while Samuel builds a small fire with practiced efficiency. They eat quickly, the food disappearing into Samuel's thin frame with concerning speed. Martha makes mental note to ensure he eats properly once they reach the cabin, assuming there's food to give him. "Your grandfather," Martha ventures during their brief rest. "What should I know to care for him?" Samuel arranges kindling with methodical precision, considering her question carefully before answering. He doesn't complain, so you have to watch for signs. When his breathing gets shallow, he needs to sit upright. When his lips turn blue, he needs the pine bark tea. He demonstrates the proper preparation technique with his hands. He's proud. Won't ask for help to the outhouse, but he needs it. Martha listens carefully, recognizing the boy is entrusting her with important knowledge, his grandfather's dignity as well as his care. "And you?" she asks. "What should I know about you?" The question seems to surprise him. Samuel looks up from the fire, wariness returning to his features. "Nothing much to know," he deflects. "I keep to myself mostly." Martha doesn't press, understanding boundaries built from necessity. Instead, she offers something of herself, a small bridge across their mutual caution. "I used to know these mountains well. My father was a trapper before the mining company came. He taught me to read weather and find north without a compass." Samuel's interest flickers visibly. "Grandfather says the same, that mountains speak to those who listen." "They do," Martha agrees, allowing herself a small smile. "Though sometimes what they say is, 'Turn back now.'" This earns her a brief, startled laugh from the boy, a sound that transforms his solemn face into something more fitting his age. Martha tucks the moment away carefully, a first small victory. They continue upward as afternoon light fades behind thickening clouds. The trail narrows, sometimes disappearing completely beneath snow, but Samuel never hesitates. Martha follows his confident steps, marveling at how completely she's placed her trust in this child she barely knows. The realization should frighten her, this leap from one uncertain situation to another. But instead, she feels strangely calm. For the first time in years, she moves towards something rather than enduring what is. "There," Samuel points as they crest a ridge. "Home." The cabin materializes through curtains of white, smaller than Martha expected, with a sagging roof and thin smoke curling from the stone chimney. A single window glows with faint lamplight, the only indication someone waits inside. Martha pauses, suddenly hesitant. Whatever lies beyond that door represents her new reality, an ailing old man, a desperate child, and whatever remnants of herself she's carried up this mountain. Samuel misinterprets her hesitation. "It's not much," he says, defensiveness creeping into his voice. "But it's dry inside, and the roof only leaks in the corner." "It's more than enough," Martha assures him, finding she means it. "Let's not keep your grandfather waiting." As they approach the cabin door, Martha touches her coat pocket, where the iron key no longer rests. Instead of its weight, She feels the smooth edges of her mother's blue handkerchief, the one possession she couldn't bear to leave behind. One threshold behind her, another ahead. Martha follows Samuel toward the glow of uncertain welcome. The cabin door opens to warmth and the sharp scent of pine resin. Samuel enters first, stamping snow from his boots with practiced motions. Martha follows, blinking as her eyes adjust to the dim interior. The single room appears smaller inside than out, dominated by a stone fireplace and two narrow beds against opposite walls. On one bed sits Ezra Reed, 75, thin as a winter sapling but upright, supported by a wooden crutch tucked beneath his arm. His face is a topographical map of age and hardship, deep lines carved by time, weather, and a life lived without compromise. A full white beard cascades over a faded flannel shirt, giving him an appearance somewhere between mountain prophet and forgotten saint. His eyes, however, remain sharp, taking Martha's measure with one comprehensive glance. "You brought someone," he observes, voice surprisingly strong despite the visible effort each breath requires. Samuel nods, suddenly hesitant now that his plan confronts reality. "This is Martha Blackwood. She's come to help." Ezra's gaze doesn't waver from Martha's face. "Blackwood's wife? The drunk from town?" Martha meets his assessment steadily. Not his wife anymore. Not as of today. Something shifts in the old man's expression, not quite approval, but acknowledgement of her direct approach. "Samuel," Ezra says without looking away from Martha, "fetch water and tend the fire. We're running low on both." The boy disappears outside, leaving the adults in momentary silence. Martha remains by the door, neither advancing nor retreating, allowing Ezra space to render judgment. He taps his crutch against the rough plank floor. "Samuel carved this when my legs first started failing. 11 years old, spent 3 days getting it right." Pride colors his voice. "Boy shouldn't have needed such skills at his age." Martha understands this is not idle conversation, but calculated revelation, Ezra showing her the child's worth through his accomplishments. "He seems resourceful," she offers, "and older than his years. Necessity does that." Ezra shifts, suppressing a cough. "He told you about our arrangement?" "He did, and you agreed. Knowing what awaits you here?" He gestures around the sparse cabin, at his own failing body. Martha considers her answer carefully, sensing its importance. "I agreed to help during your illness and to provide for Samuel after. The alternative was returning with a man who valued me less than whiskey." Ezra barks a laugh that dissolves into painful coughing. Martha moves instinctively toward him, but he waves her off, regaining control through sheer determination. "Direct," he manages finally. "Good. No time for niceties when death comes calling." The door opens as Samuel returns with a bucket of snow for melting. He glances between them anxiously, sensing the evaluation still underway. "Show Martha where things are," Ezra instructs him. "Then get some rest." "Long day for a boy your size." Samuel hesitates. "But we'll manage," Ezra cuts him off gently. "Did well bringing help. Now rest." The exhaustion Samuel has been fighting crashes visibly over him at his grandfather's permission. He shows Martha the essentials, where food is stored, which herbs are for Ezra's cough, how to bank the fire before collapsing onto his narrow bed. Asleep almost instantly, Martha removes her coat and hangs it near the fire to dry. She moves with deliberate purpose, organizing supplies and taking inventory of what the cabin contains. Ezra watches her work, his breathing labored but steady. "Not what you're used to," he observes. "Better in some ways," Martha replies honestly. "Cleaner than you'd expect for 2 men alone," Samuel's doing. Boy's particular about order. Ezra's pride in his grandson surfaces again. Gets it from his mother. "My daughter had no patience for chaos," Martha notes the past tense. "The fever Samuel mentioned?" Ezra nods once. "Took her husband and their baby girl 6 winters back. Left Samuel with nightmares he won't speak of, and me with more responsibility than an old man should have." He shifts position, wincing. Martha approaches, adjusting pillows behind him without asking permission. He accepts the help with grudging grace. Doctor says it's my lungs, he offers. Years of smoke and damp. Says there's nothing to be done except wait for the inevitable. Doctors have been wrong before, Martha responds. Though she recognizes the truth in his condition, Ezra's lips twist into what might be a smile. Not about this. Question is what happens to the boy. His gaze sharpens. That's why I agreed to Samuel's scheme. Better you than Millerville Orphanage. Martha glances at the sleeping child, understanding flowing between the adults. Better me than that, she agrees softly. Ezra studies her face in the firelight, searching for something only he knows. He paid good money for you, he says finally. Money meant for my burial and his future. I know. Was it worth it? Your freedom. Martha considers the loaded question. Freedom is relative on this mountain. For both of us. Ezra nods slowly, seemingly satisfied with her answer. He gestures toward a small wooden chest. My daughter's things are in there. Clothes might fit you better than what you brought. The offer, practical yet deeply personal, touches Martha unexpectedly. She recognizes it as tentative acceptance, the beginning of permission to belong. Thank you, she says simply. Ezra's eyes drift closed, exhaustion claiming him mid-conversation. His breathing settles into a labored rhythm as Martha continues organizing their supplies, creating order from what's available. Outside, snow blankets the mountain in deepening silence. Inside, two sleeping figures and one watchful woman form the outline of something that might, with time and care, become a kind of family. Elias Blackwood stumbles through his empty cabin door well past midnight, snow crusting his beard and eyebrows. The fire has died to embers, leaving the room cold and unwelcoming. No lamp lit in anticipation of his return. No Martha to silently rebuild warmth while avoiding his gaze. He stands swaying in the darkness, disoriented by the silence. For 15 years, this cabin has held two people, their movements choreographed around each other like reluctant dancers maintaining careful distance. Now the space echoes with singular presence, Martha. He calls alcohol muddling reality despite knowing she's gone. Silence answers. The whiskey bottle in his hand, his third since leaving the general store, is nearly empty. He drains it mechanically, then adds it to the collection beneath the loose floorboard near the stove. Dozens of bottles rest there in silent testament to years of slow destruction. Martha never mentioned finding them. Perhaps she never knew. Perhaps she simply added this knowledge to the growing catalogue of things. Better left unacknowledged between them. The leather pouch sits heavy in his pocket. Samuel Reed's payment substantially diminished after his drinking binge, but still more than Elias expected to gain from this day. He counts the remaining coins by moonlight, filtering through dirty windows, calculating how long they'll sustain his thirst. Longer than Martha sustained his needs. The thought arrives unbidden, dragging unwelcome self-awareness in its wake. He sold his wife today. The reality, momentarily obscured by alcohol's haze, strikes with sudden clarity. Not just traded or loaned as men sometimes joked about during... Elias lurches to the wash basin, suddenly nauseated. Nothing comes up but burning bile. He rinses his mouth with water gone cold hours ago, then slumps at the table where they once shared meals and sparse conversation. Memory assaults him, Martha on their wedding day, hope brightening her features as she promised herself to him. Martha tending his wounds after the logging accident, her gentle hands betraying no disgust at his mangled flesh. Martha absorbing his rage without complaint as whiskey transformed him into someone unrecognizable. The silence presses in, accusatory in its completeness. No creaking floorboards as Martha moves about her evening routine. No soft breathing from the bed they've shared since the beginning. He should feel relief. One less mouth to feed, one less witness to his degradation, one less reminder of the man he failed to remain. Instead, something hollow expands beneath his ribs. Not grief exactly, but recognition of absence where something necessary once existed. Like noticing you've stopped breathing only after oxygen runs out. Elias forces himself upright, stumbling toward his bed. Martha's side remains neatly made, pillowcase smoothed with her habitual precision. He collapses across both sides, claiming space she'll never reclaim. Sleep refuses to come. The cabin creaks and settles around him, unfamiliar sounds emerging now that Martha's presence no longer buffers them. Wind finds new entry points to whistle through. The roof drips melting snow in corners Martha always placed buckets beneath. By dawn, Elias has achieved only fitful dozing. He rises, head pounding with familiar hangover rhythm, and automatically reaches for the coffee pot Martha would have prepared. The cold stove and empty pot confront him with new reality. Coffee beans sit in their canister, but he lacks Martha's practiced hand at measuring and brewing. His first attempt produces a bitter sludge that he drinks anyway, grimacing at the taste. Breakfast presents similar challenges. Eggs require lighting the stove properly. Bread needs slicing in relatively even pieces. Tasks Martha performed without comment now demand his fumbling attention. By mid-morning, Elias has managed to feed himself inadequately and create impressive disarray throughout the small space. Dishes stack unwashed in the basin. Coffee grounds scatter across the table. Eggshells crunch underfoot. He reaches for the remaining coins, calculating whether the saloon will be open yet. Hair of the dog to settle his nerves and dull the persistent thoughts circling like vultures. What has he done? What happens when the money runs out? Will the town ever look at him with anything but contempt? The general store bell jingles as Elias enters, head down to avoid meeting anyone's gaze. A hush falls over the usual morning customers, mothers gathering supplies, farmers trading news, old men warming arthritic hands by the stove. Abernathy's normally friendly greeting remains unspoken as Elias approaches the counter. The storekeeper's expression combines disgust with something worse, pity. "Whiskey," Elias mutters, pushing coins forward. "I think you've had enough, Blackwood," Abernathy replies, making no move toward the bottles behind him. "My money's good as anyone's." "That it may be, but my conscience won't allow it," Abernathy's voice carries clearly through the silent store. Not after yesterday. Humiliation burns through Elias's alcohol haze. He becomes acutely aware of judging eyes, of whispers behind hands, of the community's collective condemnation. "My business is my business," he growls, trying to summon righteous indignation. "You made it everyone's business when you put a price tag on your wife," comes the sharp reply. Elias has no response. The truth lands like a physical blow, stealing his breath and whatever dignity he might have salvaged. He turns and leaves without the whiskey, coins clutched in sweating palm, the weight of judgment following him down the street toward the less discriminating saloon. His home stands empty. His reputation lies in tatters. His future stretches before him, bleak and solitary, and somewhere up the mountain, Martha begins again without him. Morning arrives with snow piled against the cabin windows, transforming the glass into sheets of opaque light. Martha wakes first, momentarily disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings before memory returns. The small space holds the steady breathing of Samuel and the more labored rhythm of Ezra's sleep. She rises quietly, stoking embers into flames with practiced movements. The cabin gradually warms as she takes inventory by daylight. Their supplies are meager. A half sack of cornmeal, dried beans, some jerky hanging from roof beams, preserved berries in cracked jars. Enough for a week, perhaps two with careful rationing. From her bundle, Martha retrieves a small, worn book bound in faded leather, her mother's herbal guide, passed down through generations of mountain women. Its pages detail medicinal plants, preparation methods, and healing properties recorded in careful handwriting spanning decades. Ezra stirs, coughing painfully as consciousness returns. Martha prepares pine bark tea as Samuel had demonstrated, adding honey from her own supplies, a luxury she'd grabbed impulsively while packing. "Never waste honey on me." Ezra protests weakly as she helps him sit upright. "Not waste, if it helps the medicine work." Martha counters, supporting his thin shoulders as he drinks. Samuel watches from his bed, assessing this interaction with cautious hope. When Martha sets about making breakfast, cornmeal mush enhanced with dried berries, he joins her by the stove, silently handing her implements before she asks. They establish wordless rhythms throughout the morning. Martha tends Ezra, changing sweat-dampened bedding and bathing his forehead during fever spikes. Samuel maintains the fire and fetches snow to melt for water. Ezra observes them both, conserving strength between coughing spells. "Snow's too deep for trapping today," Samuel informs Martha as sunlight strengthens outside. "Game will be sheltered anyway." Martha nods, consulting her herbal guide. "I noticed juniper and rosehips on our way up yesterday. If you'll show me where your storage containers are, I can prepare some remedies while we're snowbound." Ezra snorts from his bed. "Fancy medicine won't help what ails me, woman." "Perhaps not," Martha acknowledges without defensiveness. "But proper treatment might ease your suffering. And knowledge stored never goes to waste." She shares pages from her book with Samuel, who studies the illustrations with intense focus. "My mother collected these too," he says, pointing to a drawing of Yarrow, "before she died." "A wise woman, then," Martha replies, recognizing the opening he offers. "Would you help me prepare these?" 4 hands work better than 2. Throughout the day, they establish their positions within the cabin's confined space. 3 souls, negotiating new boundaries. Martha neither defers completely nor imposes unwanted authority. She suggests rather than demands, offers instead of takes. By evening, the cabin smells of medicinal herbs and simmering beans. Samuel sits at Ezra's bedside, reading aloud from a tattered copy of Gulliver's Travels, clearly a regular ritual between them. Martha busies herself organizing supplies, creating order that reflects respect for their existing systems while subtly improving efficiency. When Samuel's voice grows tired, Ezra gestures Martha closer. "You know plants," he states, watching her arrange dried herbs on the rough table. Martha nods. "My mother was a healer of sorts, unofficial midwife for families too far from doctors. Useful skills, sometimes. Didn't save my father from the mines, though. Or my mother when pneumonia came." Ezra studies her face, finding common understanding in shared losses. "Samuel's mother, my Catherine, had the touch with plants too. Said the mountains provided everything needed if you knew where to look." Martha recognizes the gift in this shared memory. "The boy has her eyes," she offers. "And her patience, I'd guess." That he does. Pride and sorrow mingle in Ezra's voice. Hard combination for a child, seeing too much, feeling too deeply. Children adapt to what life gives them, Martha says. Sometimes better than adults, like being sold to strangers. Ezra challenges, testing her. Martha meets his gaze steadily. Like recognizing when change, even dangerous change, offers more hope than standing still. The old man holds her eyes for a long moment before nodding slightly. "Fair answer." Samuel returns from retrieving more firewood, arms laden with split logs. He moves with precise efficiency, stacking wood neatly beside the hearth. Martha notices his small rituals. 3 logs per stack, bark facing outward, smallest pieces saved for morning kindling. Order imposed on chaos. Control where possible in a life defined by uncertainty. "You stack wood like my father taught me," she comments. "He said proper preparation prevents poor performance." Samuel's mouth quirks upward briefly. "Grandfather says the same. Wisdom sounds similar everywhere." Ezra contributes from his bed. They share a simple supper as darkness falls. Bean soup with cornbread made from dwindling supplies. Martha mentally calculates how long their food will last, weighing options against the continuing snowfall outside. "We'll need to check snare lines once weather breaks," Samuel says, following her thoughts with uncanny perception. "Maybe try ice fishing at the lower pond. I can help with both," Martha offers. "Been years since I've set snares, but my hands remember." Samuel considers her with renewed interest. "You hunt?" "When necessary. My father believed self-sufficiency shouldn't be limited by gender. This earns approving nods from both males, acceptance through demonstrated utility rather than empty promises." As they prepare for sleep, Martha improvises a pallet near the fire, refusing Samuel's offer of his bed. The boy finally relents, though he insists on providing his extra blanket. in the quiet darkness, listening to Samuel's even breathing and Ezra's labored respiration. Martha allows herself to acknowledge the strangeness of her situation. Yesterday she awoke as Elias Blackwood's wife. Tonight she sleeps as caretaker to strangers who have purchased her services with an old man's burial. Money, yet something about this desperate arrangement feels more honest than the hollow shell her marriage had become. Here at least, she serves a clear purpose beyond enduring mistreatment. Here her knowledge and strength are assets rather than threats. Outside, snow continues falling, isolating their small cabin from the world below. Inside, 3 damaged souls begin weaving something from necessity that might, with care and time, resemble healing. Sunday morning finds Elias Blackwood slouched in the back pew of Riverbend's only church. His clothes are rumpled, his eyes bloodshot, but he's sober, painfully, agonizingly sober for the first time in days. The coins from Samuel Reed have dwindled faster than anticipated, forcing unwelcome clarity upon him. The congregation maintains a careful distance, empty spaces surrounding him like a quarantine. Mothers pull children closer as they pass. Men who once shared friendly nods now find the hymnals fascinating when he meets their eyes. Reverend Collins speaks from the pulpit about mercy and forgiveness, but his gaze never quite reaches Elias's corner. The sermon's topic, the prodigal son's return, feels pointed in its timing, though whether it offers condemnation or hope remains unclear. Even those who have fallen furthest from grace may find their way back to righteousness, Collins intones, voice rising passionately. But true redemption requires genuine repentance, whispers ripple through the congregation. Several heads turn briefly toward Elias before quickly facing forward again. He shrinks further into his pew, regretting the impulse that drove him here today, some misguided hope for normalcy, perhaps, or simply escape from his empty cabin's accusing silence. The collection basket passes from row to row, eventually reaching Elias, the deacon holding it, Tom Jenkins, once a friendly acquaintance, extends the basket with visible reluctance, keeping maximum distance as if Elias's moral failings might be contagious. Elias stares at the basket's meager contents, a few coins, some carefully folded dollar bills. His hand moves automatically toward his pocket before remembering it's empty. The last of Samuel's money went for a bottle he finished yesterday. The moment stretches painfully. Jenkins's expression shifts from discomfort to something worse, pity mingled with disgust. Several nearby parishioners watch the interaction with undisguised interest. Elias withdraws his empty hand. "Next week," he mutters, though they both know it's unlikely. After the service, Elias remains seated while others file out, avoiding the customary handshaking line at the door. He waits until the church empties before rising to leave, only to find Reverend Collins waiting in the aisle. "Mr. Blackwood," the Reverend acknowledges, neither warm nor entirely cold. "I'm glad you joined us today." Elias nods awkwardly, searching for appropriate church conversation. "Good sermon," he manages. "I hope it spoke to you." Collins doesn't quite meet his eyes. "These are difficult times for many in our community." The bland statement carries unmistakable weight. Elias shifts uncomfortably, suddenly desperate to escape the oppressive sanctity surrounding him. "Martha settling in up at the Reed place?" Collins asks abruptly. The unexpected question catches Elias off guard. "I wouldn't know." "Ah." The Reverend nods as if confirming a private theory. "Well, I hear young Samuel made quite a sensible arrangement. Practical solution for all concerned." Anger flares through Elias's hangover haze. "Practical," he echoes flatly. "That what we're calling it?" Collins has the grace to look momentarily discomfited. "The Lord works in mysterious ways. Mr. Blackwood, perhaps this situation, unfortunate as its origins may be, serves a greater purpose, saving your church the trouble of caring for the boy when his grandfather passes." Elias suggests with unexpected bitterness. The Reverend's expression tightens. "The church has always provided what comfort it can, but resources are limited, especially in winter. Convenient that Martha's sacrifice spares your limited resources." I wouldn't characterize, wouldn't you? Elias interrupts, surprising himself with sudden clarity. The town watched me sell my wife and did nothing. Now you dress it up as God's mysterious ways, instead of calling it what it was. Collins draws himself up with affronted dignity. What it was, Mr. Blackwood, was the inevitable consequence of your own choices. The path to redemption begins with accepting responsibility. The platitude lands like a slap. Elias nods slowly, a bitter smile forming. And once I've accepted responsibility? What then, Reverend? Does the town forgive? Does Martha return? Does the whiskey lose its appeal? Redemption is a journey, not a destination, Collins offers lamely. A journey. Elias laughs without humor. Seems I've already reached mine. He pushes past the Reverend toward the door, desperate for fresh air and distance from judgment clothed as concern. Outside, the church's small yard has emptied of parishioners. Only Mrs. Abernathy remains, organizing donation baskets near her husband's waiting wagon. She glances up as Elias emerges, her eyes widening slightly before her expression composes into careful neutrality. Mr. Blackwood, she acknowledges with a tight nod. Elias returns the gesture, moving to pass without engaging further. He's had enough community interaction for one day. Wait, she calls suddenly, retrieving something from one of the baskets. Take this. She holds out a small package wrapped in brown paper. Bread and preserves. We had extra from the church social. They both recognize the polite fiction. The package is charity, plain and simple, but offered in a way that allows him to accept without acknowledging desperation. Pride wars briefly with hunger, before Elias accepts the package with a mumbled thanks. Mrs. Abernathy nods once, her duty discharged, and returns to her baskets without further comment. Walking home, Elias clutches the package like a lifeline. His empty cabin waits ahead, cold hearth and unwashed dishes testimony to his deteriorating circumstances. The bread will sustain him physically for another day, but does nothing for the growing hollowness inside. As he passes the saloon, familiar cravings surge. The package in his hands represents one path: sustenance, sobriety, the long, difficult road toward whatever remains of dignity. The saloon door represents another: temporary oblivion, familiar comfort, continuation of patterns well established. Elias stands motionless between options, the church bell tolling noon behind him like judgment rendered audible. The choice before him seems simultaneously momentous and trivial, one man's small decision affecting no one but himself now that Martha is gone. That thought, Martha is gone, resonates differently today. Not relief but recognition of consequence. Not freedom but solitary confinement in a life of his own making. He takes one step, then another, choice made through action rather than deliberation. The storm releases its grip on the mountain 3 days later, leaving behind a transformed landscape of pristine white, broken only by animal tracks and bent branches. Inside the cabin, a similar transformation occurs, subtle but significant, as 3 people adapt to new configurations of need and provision. Martha rises before dawn, moving quietly through morning rituals established during their snowbound days. She stokes the fire, prepares Ezra's medications, and sets water to boil for breakfast. These tasks, once performed by Samuel, have naturally shifted to her capable hands, freeing the boy for other responsibilities. Samuel enters from outside, bringing cold air and morning light as he deposits an armload of firewood. Without prompting, he moves to check his grandfather, adjusting blankets and helping the old man sit upright for his morning dose. "Breathing's better today," Samuel reports to Martha, his voice carrying the serious assessment of someone accustomed to medical observation beyond his years. Martha nods, pouring pine bark tea into Ezra's favorite chipped mug. The juniper steam seems to help overnight. Ezra accepts their attention with grudging grace, his pride still struggling against increasing dependency. Yet something has eased in his bearing, a slight softening at Martha's competent care and his grandson's obvious relief at shared responsibility. Weather's cleared, he announces, gesturing toward the window. Boy needs to check trap lines. Samuel looks toward Martha, an unconscious shift that doesn't escape Ezra's notice. The transfer of authority, however subtle, represents significant realignment in their small household. We should check supplies first, Martha suggests. Make a list of priorities. Samuel nods in agreement. Fish might be running in the lower stream, and juniper berries need gathering before snow covers them again. I can manage alone for a few hours, Ezra insists, correctly reading their hesitation about leaving him unattended. Martha considers this practically rather than emotionally. We'll prepare everything you might need within reach. Samuel can check close trap lines while I gather berries. Either of us goes farther than calling distance. This compromise satisfies all parties, Ezra's pride, Samuel's responsibilities, and Martha's caution. They prepare for their separate tasks, with efficient coordination developed through days of close quarters. As Martha wraps her threadbare coat tighter and searches for adequate footwear, Samuel disappears into the small storage lean-to attached to the cabin's northern wall. He returns carrying something wrapped in oilcloth, presenting it to Martha with uncharacteristic shyness. Made these last summer, he explains, unwrapping a pair of small snowshoes sized perfectly for a woman's feet. Grandfather taught me how. Martha accepts them with genuine surprise, running her fingers over the carefully woven webbing stretched across bent ash frames. The craftsmanship is remarkable, tight, even weaving, suggesting hours of patient work. These are beautifully made, she says, noting how the bindings have been adjusted to accommodate various boot sizes. But why would you make women's snowshoes? Samuel glances toward his grandfather, who nods permission for a truth they've both protected. For when we found someone, Samuel admits quietly, Grandfather said eventually we'd need help, and we should be prepared to make them welcome. The simple statement carries profound meaning, evidence that Martha's arrival, while precipitated by Elias's desperate act, had been anticipated in some form by this mountain family, not as purchased help, but as necessary addition. Been planning a while, Ezra confirms from his bed. Just didn't expect arrangements to happen quite that way. Martha feels unexpected emotion rise at this revelation. The snowshoes represent not just practical preparation, but recognition of inevitable need for community, something these isolated men acknowledged despite their fierce independence. Thank you, she says simply. Understanding the gift transcends its practical value. Samuel helps adjust the bindings to her boots, demonstrating proper walking technique with serious instructiveness. Martha listens attentively, honoring his expertise despite her own familiarity with snowshoes from childhood. Outside, the brilliant cold stings her cheeks as Martha tests the snowshoes across the cabin's clearing. They perform perfectly, keeping her atop deep drifts as she follows Samuel's instructions. The mountain spreads below in panoramic clarity, ridge after ridge fading into blue distance, valley fog lifting in morning sunlight. For a moment, Martha pauses to absorb the vista. So different from the limited horizons of her life with Elias. The space, the silence, the sheer scope of possibilities stretches before her like the untouched snow. Freedom carries its own responsibilities, but the weight feels different. Chosen rather than imposed. Samuel approaches with a collecting bag for juniper berries, his small frame dwarfed by the landscape, yet perfectly adapted to its demands. His face, usually serious beyond his years, briefly reflects childlike satisfaction at Martha's successful use of his creation. The South Ridge has the best berries, he informs her. I'll check traps along the eastern path and meet you back here in 2 hours. Martha notes how he's carefully calculated routes that keep them both within earshot of the cabin. Protection. For Ezra and herself, disguised as practical planning. This child, who has shouldered adult burdens alone, now includes her in his careful calculations. 2 hours, she confirms. Be careful near the ravine crossing. He nods, accepting her concern without resentment. As they part in different directions, Martha realizes this moment represents significant trust, each venturing independently, yet part of a coordinated effort towards shared survival. The snowshoes carry her easily up the ridge where juniper bushes peek through snowdrifts. Martha works methodically, collecting berries while scanning for other useful plants her mother taught her to recognize in winter dormancy. From this elevation, she can see the distant town where Elias remains, a collection of smoke plumes and tiny structures in the valley below. The physical distance provides emotional perspective, allowing her to view her former life as if reading someone else's story. Whatever happens next will be her chapter to write, difficult certainly, with responsibilities to an ailing old man and a too serious child, with winter hardships and uncertain spring, but hers to determine step by careful step across unbroken snow. Elias sits at his kitchen table, staring at the half-empty whiskey bottle. His first in 3 days. The liquid catches amber light from the single lantern, promising familiar comfort and oblivion. His hand rests beside it, not quite touching the glass, trembling slightly from both desire and its denial. The cabin around him bears evidence of halting attempts at order. Dishes stand washed and stacked, if not perfectly clean. Firewood has been brought in and arranged beside the stove. The floor shows awkward sweeping efforts. Though corners remain untouched, these small improvements represent painful hours of forcing himself through basic tasks once invisible to him when Martha performed them. Each mundane action requires deliberate thought now. How to heat water without burning the pot. How to measure coffee without wasting precious grounds. How to maintain minimal cleanliness without Martha's practiced efficiency. Reverend Collins's words echo persistently. The path to redemption begins with accepting responsibility. Elias snorts derisively at the memory. Yet here he sits, sober more often than not this week, attempting rudimentary self-sufficiency, resisting the complete surrender to whiskey that beckoned immediately after Martha's departure. He's not foolish enough to call these small efforts redemption. Perhaps just survival instinct, finally overcoming self-destruction. Or simple practical necessity. The money from Samuel Reed has run out, forcing involuntary sobriety until he can earn more. Tomorrow he'll approach the sawmill again, offering labor despite previous rejections. Manual work, loading wagons or stacking lumber, anything to generate income. His pride, once formidable obstacle to accepting such positions, has been sufficiently crushed by public humiliation to no longer protest. The whiskey bottle tempts from its position of prominence. Purchased with his last coins, it represents competing impulses, a reward for maintaining sobriety long enough to clean the cabin, or proof that his commitment to change remains tenuous at best. A knock at the door startles him from contemplation. Visitors have become rare since Martha's departure, the community maintaining collective distance from his disgrace. Henry Matthews stands on his doorstep, shifting uncomfortably in the cold. Elias hasn't seen his former friend since the general store incident. Henry had been present but silent, neither condemning nor defending. "Evening, Elias," Henry offers awkwardly. "Mind if I come in?" Elias steps aside wordlessly, suddenly conscious of the whiskey bottle's prominent position on the table. Too late to hide it now, though Henry's gaze notes its half-empty state and Elias's relative sobriety with visible surprise. "Didn't expect company," Elias mutters by way of explanation for the cabin's condition. "Place looks better than I anticipated," Henry responds, removing his hat. "Thought you might have—" He trails off, leaving unspoken assumptions hanging between them. "Drunk myself to death," Elias suggests flatly. "Week's not over yet." Henry winces at the bitter joke. He places a small package on the table, smoked fish wrapped in paper. "Sarah thought you might need this. We had extra. The second charity offering this week." Elias's pride bristles, but hunger overrules it. "Thank her for me." Awkward silence stretches between them, two men who once shared easy companionship, now separated by moral judgment, neither can fully articulate. "Heard anything from up the mountain?" Henry finally asks, gesturing vaguely toward where Martha now resides. "Why would I?" Elias responds, defensive edge sharpening his voice, just wondering how she's faring with the old man and the boy. Better than with me, I expect. The raw honesty surprises them both. Henry studies Elias with new assessment, noting the whiskey bottle's proximity and untouched state. Saw you at church Sunday, Henry offers. Don't read too much into it, Elias warns. Was cold and needed somewhere warm. Henry nods, accepting the deflection. Mill's hiring for spring timber preparation. Mentioned your name to Foreman Wilson. Elias looks up sharply. Why would you do that? 15 years working together before your accident. You know wood better than most. Henry shrugs, as if the recommendation requires no explanation. Said they need experienced men who can identify prime cutting stands. Hope flickers briefly before Elias suppresses it. Wilson knows my reputation. Man cares about profit more than morals. Just show up sober tomorrow, 8 o'clock. The information, practical opportunity rather than empty platitudes, catches Elias off guard. He studies his former friend, searching for hidden judgment or pity. Why are you helping me, Henry? After what I did? Henry considers the question seriously, removing his gloves and warming his hands by the meager fire. Known you 30 years. Watched you break your back working, then break your spirit after the accident. What you did was wrong. No excusing that, he pauses, organizing thoughts carefully. But I've seen men come back from worse. Takes work, takes time. Takes someone believing it's possible. Martha believed. Look where that got her. Martha endured, Henry corrects gently. Different thing entirely. The distinction lands with unexpected weight. Elias had never considered the difference, had interpreted Martha's silent perseverance as faith in his potential redemption rather than simple survival. Mechanism, doctor says the tremors will ease eventually. Henry continues practically, if you stay off the bottle long enough. Might never have the same steadiness for detail work, but your eye for timber quality doesn't require steady hands. Elias glances at the whiskey bottle, its presence suddenly accusatory rather than comforting. Been 3 days, he admits quietly. Except half that one. Henry nods, neither praising nor diminishing the modest achievement. 1 day becomes 2, 2 become a week, and then Elias asks, genuine uncertainty in his voice, and then you keep going. Build something different from what was lost. Henry rises to leave, having delivered both tangible and intangible assistance without lingering to witness Elias's response to either. At the door, he pauses. 8 o'clock, sober. Wilson won't offer twice. After Henry's departure, Elias returns to the table where bottle and opportunity now sit side by side, competing futures demanding choice. With deliberate movement, he picks up the whiskey, feeling its familiar weight and promise. For a long moment he holds it, memory and craving warring against fragile, newfound purpose. Then, with slow precision, he replaces the cork and sets the bottle on the highest shelf, not emptied, not discarded, but deliberately displaced from immediate reach. 1 day becomes 2. 2 become a week. Tomorrow begins at 8 o'clock. 2 weeks pass on the mountain, each day establishing deeper patterns between Martha and Samuel as they care for Ezra. They've developed an unspoken language of nods and glances that communicate needs across the small cabin. Their coordination reminds Martha of long-married couples who anticipate each other's movements without discussion. The calendar hangs beside Ezra's bed, Martha's neat handwriting tracking medicine doses, symptoms, and small improvements. Samuel adds his own observations in careful script beneath hers, temperature estimates, breathing patterns, food consumed. Together they create a detailed record that guides their care and marks the slow passage of difficult days. Morning brings weak winter sunshine through frosted windows as Martha grinds pine bark for tea. Samuel returns from checking trap lines, stomping snow from his boots with a triumphant expression. Caught 2 rabbits, he announces, holding up his prize. Fat ones too, Martha smiles at his evident pride. Perfect timing. The smoked venison is nearly gone. They work together preparing the rabbits, Samuel skinning, while Martha readies herbs and root vegetables salvaged from their dwindling stores. These small shared tasks have created comfortable routines between them, a domestic partnership built on necessity rather than blood relation. Ezra watches from his bed, offering occasional advice, though his voice grows weaker each day. This morning he seems stronger, propped against pillows Martha arranged for better breathing. "Boys becoming quite the provider," he comments, as Samuel efficiently dresses the rabbits. Catherine would be proud. The mention of Samuel's mother, increasingly frequent in recent days, brings momentary shadow to the boy's expression before he masters it. Martha has noticed how he collects these references like precious stones, storing each memory of his parents carefully away. "Learned from the best," Samuel responds, the compliment encompassing both his grandfather and his absent parents. "Should check the Southern Valley next," Ezra suggests, his mind still mapping hunting grounds despite his failing body. "Used to find turkey tracks there after fresh snow." Martha exchanges glances with Samuel, both recognizing Ezra's attempted normalcy despite his condition. They maintain this fiction carefully, discussing future plans, speaking of spring planting, preserving his dignity through inclusion in decisions he likely won't live to see implemented. "We'll go tomorrow if your breathing stays strong," Martha promises Ezra, marking the calendar with a small note. Today's medicine seems to be helping. She doesn't mention that she's been carefully rationing their medicinal herbs, stretching supplies through creative substitutions. The winter has proven harsher than expected, limiting foraging opportunities and extending their isolation. Samuel finishes with the rabbits and brings a basin of water for washing. Without prompting, he moves to help his grandfather with morning ablutions, a task that once embarrassed Ezra, but which he now accepts with quiet dignity. The boy performs these intimate duties with matter-of-fact compassion that speaks to months of practice. Martha turns away to provide privacy, concentrating on breakfast preparation. She's learned when her presence helps and when it intrudes, another delicate balance in their evolving household. "Martha," Ezra calls once Samuel has finished. "Come sit a moment." She joins him, noting the increased hollowness in his cheeks, the bluish tint around his lips despite improved breathing. Time is becoming precious, measured in days rather than weeks. "Need to speak plainly while I still can," Ezra begins, voice steadier than it's been in days. "About after," Martha nods, understanding his meaning. Samuel stiffens slightly across the room, but continues his work, listening while pretending not to. "Boy needs schooling," Ezra continues. "Reads well enough, but numbers give him trouble. Important for tracking trading. I can help with that," Martha assures him. "My father insisted on education despite limited opportunities," Ezra nods, satisfied with this answer. "Land deeds in the box under my bed. Paid off 15 years ago. Not much, but it's something to stand on." The practical discussion of inheritance, conducted while the beneficiary stands within earshot, strikes. Martha is perfectly aligned with this family's straightforward approach to difficult matters. "Samuel knows where everything is," Ezra continues. "Knows this mountain better than most grown men. Trust his instincts, but watch his tendency to take on too much. Gets that from his mother." Martha listens carefully, recognizing these insights as precious gifts, a dying man's accumulated wisdom about the child she's agreed to raise. "He doesn't cry easily," Ezra adds more quietly. "Holds grief tight inside, not healthy in the long run." "I've noticed," Martha acknowledges, recalling Samuel's controlled reactions to his grandfather's declining health. "After I'm gone, he'll try to be man of the house immediately. Don't let him skip being a boy sometimes." The request, touching in its understanding of childhood needs, despite harsh circumstances, reveals Ezra's deeper concerns beneath his practical exterior. Martha reaches for his weathered hand, offering reassurance through touch rather than promises that might sound hollow. Ezra accepts the gesture briefly before pulling away, uncomfortable with prolonged sentiment. "One more thing," he adds with renewed gruffness. "Whatever happens with that husband of yours," "former husband," Martha corrects gently, "whatever he does, don't let the boy carry your burden. Samuel takes responsibility for everything around him. Don't need him thinking he must protect you from past troubles. The insight surprises Martha, this perception of potential future complications she herself hasn't fully considered. Despite his isolation, Ezra understands human nature and its predictable patterns. "I won't," she promises. Samuel approaches with Ezra's morning medicine, effectively ending their private conversation. The boy's expression reveals he's absorbed more than they intended, but he maintains the pretense of not having heard. "Rabbit stew for dinner," Martha announces, returning to practical matters. "And we should finish those mittens today before checking the South Valley." She makes a note on their calendar. Another normal day planned. Another extension of routine that helps them all maintain necessary fiction that tomorrow remains guaranteed. Outside, wind shifts direction, bringing warmer air that promises temporary thaw. Inside, three people continue their careful dance around unspoken truths, creating family from circumstance one, marked calendar day at a time. Elias Blackwood stands among other men at the sawmill yard, his breath clouding in the cold morning air. His hands, once steadier than most with an axe or saw, tremble slightly as he waits for Foreman Wilson to assign the day's tasks. 2 weeks of sobriety have improved, but not eliminated the physical reminders of years spent drinking. The timesheet passes from man to man, each marking arrival with practiced initials. When it reaches Elias, he notes his name written below the others. Added recently in different ink, the letters awkwardly spaced as if squeezed in as afterthought. Still, it's there, official acknowledgement of his provisional return to productive society. Blackwood, Wilson calls, a barrel-chested man, whose respect is earned through competence rather than conversation. Take Porter and Lewis up to the North Ridge. Mark stands for spring cutting. No clear cutting, selective mature trees only. Elias nods, surprised at being assigned leadership of the small scouting party. Porter and Lewis, both younger men relatively new to timber work, exchange glances but offer no protest. His reputation as a skilled woodsman evidently survives despite his personal disgrace. Maps in the office. Wilson continues. Check in by sundown. The simple instruction carries weight beyond its practical purpose. Trust that Elias will return, sober and responsible, with valuable information for spring operations. Small trust, perhaps, but more than he's been granted in months. Inside the cramped office, Elias retrieves the maps and marking tags. His fingers trace familiar terrain, ridges and valleys he's known since boyhood, forests whose patterns and cycles he understands intuitively. This knowledge remains intact, despite everything else he's lost. Porter and Lewis wait outside, stamping feet against morning cold. Neither man meets Elias's eyes directly, maintaining careful distance imposed by his reputation. He doesn't blame them. Stories of Martha's sale likely circulated throughout the county by now, alongside whispered accounts of his subsequent struggles. Northridge stands haven't been properly assessed in 3 seasons, Elias informs them, focusing on work rather than awkward social navigation. Look for mature oak and maple primarily. Tag anything with trunk diameter larger than this. He demonstrates with his hands. The younger men nod, grateful for clear direction that allows them to interact professionally without addressing the uncomfortable situation. As they gather equipment and prepare to depart, Elias feels Wilson's evaluating gaze from the mill doorway, measuring his competence, sobriety, and reliability with each movement. The day unfolds in welcome physical activity as they climb steadily through snow-covered forest. Elias's body remembers this work despite months of neglect. How to move efficiently through underbrush, how to read terrain for easiest passage, how to scan tree stands for optimal assessment. The tremor in his hands diminishes with purposeful movement. By midday, they've established productive rhythm. Porter and Lewis gradually relax as Elias demonstrates expertise without condescension, teaching rather than commanding as they identify prime cutting specimens. His knowledge proves valuable enough to overcome initial reservations about working alongside him. never realized how much selection matters. Porter comments as Elias explains why certain trees should remain despite impressive size. "Grandfather taught me to think 3 generations ahead," Elias explains. "What we leave determines what future loggers will find." The wisdom passed through his family before alcohol obscured such lessons emerges naturally. Speaking these inherited insights aloud reminds Elias of connections extending beyond his individual failures, knowledge that deserves preservation despite his personal disgrace. They break for a cold lunch near a sheltered clearing. Conversation remains work-focused, but loses earlier tension as shared purpose bridges uncomfortable history. Neither younger man mentions Martha or Elias's situation, a courtesy that allows professional interaction without forced reconciliation. As afternoon advances, their path takes them higher toward ridgelines, separating the town's valley from less populated mountain territory beyond. From one elevated vantage point, Elias can see both the town below and, turning northward, distant smoke rising from what might be an isolated cabin. He pauses, momentarily lost in geography's implications. Somewhere in that direction, Martha establishes new life with Samuel and his dying grandfather. The physical proximity, visible from this single location, despite separate worlds, strikes Elias with unexpected force. "Everything all right, Mr. Blackwood?" Lewis asks. Noticing his extended silence, Elias nods, returning focus to immediate surroundings. Just calculating best approach to the northeast stand. They continue working until approaching sunset necessitates return journey. The day's accomplishments are substantial. Dozens of trees marked for spring harvest, detailed notes on terrain conditions, recommendations for access trail improvements. Honest work completed competently. Back at the mill yard, Wilson reviews their findings with gruff approval. "Good assessment," he acknowledges, examining Elias's notations, "more detailed than I expected for one day's work." The simple professional validation, earned through demonstrated skill rather than sympathy, carries profound weight. Elias accepts it with quiet nod, neither overreacting to praise nor diminishing its significance. Same team tomorrow, Wilson decides. Western Ridge needs similar assessment. As other workers disperse toward homes and families, Elias collects his first day's wages, modest payment, but legitimately earned. The coins feel different from Samuel Reed's money or community charity, heavy with possibility rather than shame. His route home passes the general store where everything changed weeks ago. Through the window, he glimpses Abernathy arranging inventory, the same store, continuing its community function despite witnessing his greatest moral failure. Life proceeds regardless of individual catastrophes. Elias hesitates, then enters deliberately. Conversation stops as customers notice his presence. Abernathy watches warily from behind his counter. "Need supplies," Elias states simply, placing coins on the counter. "Coffee, flour, salt pork." Abernathy studies him a moment, noting clear eyes and steady purpose, before nodding and gathering requested items. The transaction proceeds normally, business conducted without reference to their last explosive interaction in this space. As Elias turns to leave with his purchases, Abernathy calls after him. "Mill keeping you busy?" "Enough," Elias responds, recognizing the question as tentative olive branch rather than idle curiosity. Abernathy nods. "Good to hear." 2 simple words carrying complex meaning: acknowledgement of effort, tentative community reacceptance, possibility of gradual redemption through demonstrated change rather than dramatic gestures. Elias returns to his cabin, carrying more than supplies, a timesheet with his name, a day's honest wages, and fragile connection to community he'd nearly surrendered completely. Small foundations upon which something might eventually be rebuilt. The inevitable happens on a clear February morning when night's bitter cold gives way to deceptive sunshine. Martha wakes to unusual silence. The absence of Ezra's labored breathing creates negative space more noticeable than sound ever was. She knows before crossing the small cabin to his bedside. Something fundamental has shifted in the room's atmosphere, a presence transformed to absence between darkness and dawn. Samuel still sleeps in his corner, face peaceful in temporary reprieve from constant vigilance. Ezra lies motionless, features composed in dignity that eluded him during final painful weeks. One hand rests atop the quilt Martha made from salvaged fabric. The other clutches his pocket watch, the timepiece he checked compulsively throughout his illness, as if monitoring his remaining hours with characteristic precision. Martha gently closes his eyes, then stands silent beside his bed, offering wordless respect to this man she's known briefly yet intimately. Their relationship, begun through unusual transaction and deepened through shared purpose, deserves proper acknowledgement before practical matters. "Intrude, you held on longer than anyone expected," she whispers, straightening his blanket with automatic tidiness. Gave him time to prepare. Samuel stirs across the room, some sixth sense alerting him to significant change despite sleep's protection. Martha watches him wake, observing the exact moment awareness registers in his eyes. First confusion, then dawning comprehension as he notes her position beside his grandfather's still form. The boy says nothing. He rises, crosses to the bed, and stands beside Martha with straight shoulders and controlled breathing. Together, they observe the man who connected them, now departed from their improvised family circle. "He waited for daylight," Samuel finally says, voice steadier than Martha expected. "Always said nighttime was poor manners for important business." The observation, so perfectly aligned with Ezra's practical character, breaks tension slightly. Martha places her hand on Samuel's shoulder, offering grounding contact without demanding emotional response. "I should dig the grave," he continues, voice mechanical as he mentally catalogues necessary tasks. "Ground's too frozen," Martha reminds him gently. "Remember what your grandfather said about mountain burials in winter?" Samuel nods, recalling conversations they'd had during Ezra's final weeks, practical discussions of death's logistics conducted without sentimentality or evasion. "The storage shed until spring thaw. Keep him with us until proper burial is possible. We'll prepare him properly," Martha assures him. "With all the respect he deserves." Samuel's composure wavers slightly before he masters it. "He showed me what to do last summer when he first got sick. Made me practice wrapping techniques." The revelation, this child rehearsing his grandfather's burial preparations months ago, strikes Martha with painful clarity. Samuel has anticipated this moment far longer than she has, preparing with the same methodical approach he brings to all survival challenges. She realizes he's waiting for her guidance. This boy, accustomed to responsibility, now temporarily adrift in grief, he won't fully acknowledge. Martha keeps her voice matter-of-fact, matching his need for practical structure. "We'll need clean wrapping cloth, the white cotton sheet in the trunk, and cedar branches. They preserve and protect." Samuel nods gratefully, relieved to have concrete tasks rather than facing emotions still too overwhelming. "I'll gather cedar. Eastern Slope has the best branches. After breakfast," Martha amends firmly. "Your grandfather would insist on proper order. Food first, then work." This reference to Ezra's priorities provides comforting continuity. Samuel accepts her direction without protest, allowing Martha to guide him toward the table where she quickly prepares simple porridge. They eat mechanically, necessary fuel for difficult work ahead. Throughout the day, they perform death's rituals with careful attention to Ezra's previously expressed wishes. Samuel retrieves fragrant cedar boughs while Martha prepares the body, washing gently, dressing in clean clothes, combing the white beard with dignified precision. When Samuel returns, they work together, wrapping Ezra in the white sheet, then securing the bundle with careful bindings. The boy's hands remain steady throughout the process, his focus absolute, as if technical perfection might somehow compensate for emotional devastation he cannot express. Martha watches him tuck cedar branches around his grandfather's shrouded form, noting how he positions each sprig with deliberate placement. When he hesitates over the pocket watch still clutched in Ezra's hand, she speaks gently. What did he want done with it? "Said I should have it," Samuel answers, voice barely audible. "To remember that time waits for no man, and mountains stand while people pass. Then it belongs with you now." Samuel shakes his head slightly, not ready to take it from him yet. Martha understands this reluctance. The symbolic finality of claiming inheritance feels premature while grief remains raw. "It can wait for spring burial," she assures him. Some transitions shouldn't be rushed. They carry Ezra's body together to the storage shed where winter cold will preserve it until proper burial becomes possible. The small procession, just two people bearing their shared responsibility, moves with solemn dignity across snow-covered ground. Inside the shed, they place him on prepared boards, arranging cedar boughs around and beneath the shrouded form. Samuel stands motionless afterward, face impassive, though his clasped hands betray white-knuckled tension. Martha waits beside him, neither rushing his private farewell nor leaving him to face it alone. When he finally speaks, his voice carries forced practicality that doesn't quite mask underlying vulnerability. "We should check trap lines before dark. And the firewood needs stacking. Life's necessities continue, grief notwithstanding." Martha recognizes his retreat into routine as necessary protection rather than emotional avoidance. "We'll do those things," she agrees. "But first let's just breathe a moment. Your grandfather valued proper pacing. This permission to pause, framed as honoring Ezra's wisdom rather than acknowledging emotional needs, allows Samuel to stand quietly beside her for several minutes, gathering internal resources before facing a world irrevocably changed by absence. When they finally return to the cabin, Martha notices Samuel walking slightly differently, shoulders carrying new weight beyond physical burden. The pocket watch remains with Ezra for now, but its symbolic responsibility has already transferred to the boy, who must now become something more than child, yet cannot possibly be fully man. Evening finds them maintaining surface normalcy through familiar routines while adjusting to silence where Ezra's breathing once provided constant backdrop. Their improvised family has contracted by 1/3, the remaining two now connected directly without intermediary bond. Martha watches Samuel across the firelit cabin, recognizing both his resilience and fragility in this crucial transition. Whatever happens next, they face it together, guardian and child bound by unusual circumstance into necessary partnership. Spring announces itself with subtle persistence, longer daylight, occasional birdsong, and the first muddy patches appearing through melting snow. 6 weeks have passed since Ezra's death. Weeks filled with quiet routine as Martha and Samuel establish patterns independent of the presence that once defined their household. Martha kneels in cold earth behind the cabin, testing soil readiness for eventual planting. The ground remains largely frozen, but edges near the south-facing wall show promising softness. She makes mental inventory of seeds saved from Ezra's previous garden: beans, squash, turnips, calculating how to expand production for two people with uncertain prospects. Samuel approaches from the forest path, returning from checking trap lines that have grown increasingly productive as wildlife emerges from winter dormancy. His slight frame carries a brace of rabbits and his grandfather's ancient hunting rifle, a weapon he handles with careful competence despite being barely strong enough to shoulder it. "Properly good hunting," Martha observes. Noting his successful morning, Samuel nods, depositing his catch near the outdoor cleaning station they've established. "Saw deer tracks too. Fresh ones. Maybe tomorrow." Martha watches as he systematically prepares the rabbits for cooking, his movements precise and practiced. The weeks since Ezra's death have aged him, not through diminished childishness, as that quality had long been absent, but through intensified self-sufficiency that borders on isolation. though they share the cabin amicably and work together effectively. Samuel has withdrawn emotionally, channeling grief into relentless activity and practical improvement. He speaks less, sleeps poorly, and maintains constant vigilance, as if expecting further loss at any moment. Martha respects his process while monitoring carefully for concerning patterns. Her own grief for Ezra, different but genuine, expresses itself through honoring promises made to care for his grandson properly. "Mail carrier passed while you were out," she mentions casually. "Left something from town." Samuel looks up sharply, wariness evident. Interaction with the outside world has been minimal during winter months. Occasional supply trades with nearest neighbors, but otherwise complete isolation from the community below. What did they want? The defensive note in his voice confirms Martha's concerns about his tension level. She keeps her tone deliberately casual. "Haven't opened it yet. Was waiting for you." Inside, Martha retrieves the official-looking envelope addressed to current residents. "Reed Homestead." The formal phrasing strikes her as deliberately impersonal. Ignoring both her presence and Samuel's name, they sit at the rough kitchen table as Martha opens the letter, Samuel watching with unconcealed apprehension. She reads silently first, absorbing implications before sharing contents aloud. "It's from the town council," she explains, keeping her voice neutral despite internal alarm. "Regarding your guardianship situation," Samuel's expression hardens. "They want to send me to Millerville, not a question, but a conclusion born from long-standing fear." Martha doesn't contradict him because the letter indeed suggests exactly that, couched in bureaucratic language about proper arrangements and suitable guardianship for a minor child. They're sending representatives next week to assess the situation, she summarizes. "Reverend Collins and Dr. Mitchell." Samuel's hands clench into fists on the tabletop. "They can't take me. This is my home, grandfather's land. They acknowledge your claim to the property," Martha clarifies, still processing implications herself. "But they question my legal standing as your guardian." The crux of their predicament emerges clearly. Their unusual arrangement, begun through desperate transaction and solidified through shared adversity, lacks official sanction. Without legal recognition, their functional family remains vulnerable to outside intervention. "You were grandfather's choice," Samuel insists, voice rising slightly. "He gave you permission to stay." "I know that," Martha assures him gently. "And you know that." But legally, she hesitates, searching for age-appropriate explanation for complex realities. Their situation exists in uncomfortable territory, neither traditional adoption nor recognized guardianship, beginning through ethically questionable transaction involving her estranged husband. Legally, "Our arrangement is unusual," she finally continues. "The council wants to ensure proper care for you. They want to send me away," Samuel translates bluntly, "to strangers." Martha reads further, identifying potential allies and obstacles within the carefully worded document. "Dr. Mitchell expresses some support for our current situation, noting your good health and appropriate development." "And Reverend Collins?" Samuel asks, political awareness beyond his years, evident in recognizing key power figures. Martha chooses honesty over protective omission. "He has reservations about my guardianship given my unusual arrival here." Samuel absorbs this information with the same stoic calculation he brings to all challenges. "Because Elias sold you. They think that makes you unsuitable." The direct acknowledgement of their beginnings, something neither has mentioned explicitly since Ezra's death, hangs between them. Martha nods, respecting his understanding enough to confirm rather than deflect. "That's part of it. And I have no legal standing without your grandfather or my former husband's approval." Samuel's mind works visibly, processing implications and formulating strategies with adult thoroughness. "We could leave. Go deeper into the mountains. I know places where they wouldn't find us." The suggestion, part childish fantasy, part genuine survival calculation, reveals his profound fear of separation. Martha reaches across the table, covering his still clenched fist with her palm. Running would only convince them I'm unsuitable, she explains gently. We need to face this properly. How? Samuel demands, rare emotional intensity breaking through his careful control. They've already decided. Martha studies the letter again, identifying procedural details that might provide opportunity. They're required to conduct a proper assessment. That gives us chance to demonstrate our situation, show them I'm fine here, with you. Exactly. We prepare the cabin, demonstrate adequate food supplies, show your continued education. Martha's mind catalogues necessary preparations with practical focus that matches Samuel's approach to challenges. Samuel's expression remains skeptical, but determined. And if they still want to take me away? Martha meets his gaze directly, allowing him to see her absolute commitment. Then we explore other options. But first, we try the proper channels. The boy studies her face, searching for reassurance beyond words. Whatever he sees, there appears to satisfy some internal question. His shoulders relax slightly as partnership in this new challenge solidifies their connection. 1 week to prepare, he confirms, switching immediately to practical planning mode. We should repair the north wall first and organize grandfather's documentation. Martha nods, relieved by his constructive response to potential crisis. We'll be ready, together. The letter remains on the table between them, external threat to their improvised family, yet simultaneously catalyst for explicitly acknowledging what they've become to each other through circumstance and choice. Elias stands before the small mirror in his cabin, barely recognizing the man reflected back. 3 months of sobriety have transformed him physically. Face less bloated, eyes clearer, hands steadier than they've been in years. His beard is neatly trimmed, hair combed, clothes clean if worn. On the table beside him sits a newly polished brass compass, purchased with carefully saved wages from the sawmill. The instrument isn't strictly necessary for someone who knows these mountains intimately, but its symbolism matters more than practical. Function, direction, purpose, navigation. Towards something rather than merely away from past. Failures. Today marks an important threshold, his first visit to town beyond. Essential supply runs and work responsibilities. For weeks, he's limited his movements to minimize community interaction, focusing instead on rebuilding his home's physical condition alongside his own rehabilitation. The cabin now stands weather-tight, orderly, provisioned through honest labor rather than charity or borrowed funds. Elias picks up the compass, checking its accuracy by habit before slipping it into his pocket. The weight feels reassuring against his hip as he leaves the cabin, securing the door behind him. The 2-mile walk to town gives him time to rehearse his approach. Not quite an apology tour. Empty words won't erase actions that altered lives permanently, but a demonstration of change through consistent behavior and fulfilled obligations. Riverbend emerges around the bend. Spring sunlight illuminating awakening gardens and newly repaired winter damage. Elias enters town with deliberate, unhurried pace, acknowledging passers-by with respectful nods rather than downcast avoidance. Some return the gesture, others maintain careful distance. He accepts both responses as natural. Consequence of his history, the general store represents his most significant destination, the site of his greatest public. Disgrace now transformed into testing ground for potential redemption. Elias pauses outside, gathering resolve before pushing open the familiar door. Conversation diminishes as he enters, though not with the dramatic silence that once greeted his appearances. Several customers continue their business while watching him peripherally. Abernathy offers professional greeting without warmth or coldness, neutrality representing significant improvement over previous interactions. Mr. Abernathy, Elias acknowledges, approaching the counter with purposeful calm. I'd like to settle my account. The statement catches Abernathy by surprise. The storekeeper consults his ledger with skeptical expression. Your current purchases are paid in full, Mr. Blackwood. I meant the outstanding balance. From before, understanding dawns on Abernathy's face. For years before Martha's departure, Elias had maintained running credit, sometimes paid, often expanded, eventually representing significant debt that both men tacitly understood might never be resolved. That account was... Abernathy hesitates, searching for diplomatic phrasing. I considered it closed under the circumstances. I'd prefer to settle it properly, Elias insists. Removing an envelope containing carefully counted bills, 3 months of disciplined saving beyond basic necessities. With interest for your patience. The transaction represents more than financial settlement. It's deliberate severance from his previous existence. Closing chapters that cannot be rewritten, but might be followed by different narrative. Abernathy accepts the envelope with thoughtful expression, making proper notation in his ledger. Account paid in full, he confirms, offering receipt with newfound respect. The interaction attracts subtle attention from other customers, their assessment recalibrating slightly. Not forgiveness or forgetfulness, but acknowledgement that change, however belated, deserves recognition. As Elias turns to leave, Abernathy speaks again. Mr. Blackwood, heard you've been doing good work for Wilson at the mill. Trying to. Elias acknowledges modestly. My brother-in-law's looking for experienced help with timber assessment on his northern property. If you're interested, the offer, professional opportunity based on skill rather than charity or sympathy, carries significant weight. Elias recognizes it as tentative bridge from community isolation toward provisional reintegration. I'd be glad to help, he responds, careful not to overreact to this small opening. Outside the store, Elias pauses to check his compass, adjusting his planned route through town. His next stop requires greater courage, the church where Reverend Collins might be found preparing Sunday services. The small white building stands silent in morning light, its simple architecture representing both judgment and potential absolution. Elias approaches with respectful demeanor, removing his hat before entering the empty sanctuary. Collins looks up from altar preparations, surprise evident at this unexpected visitor. Mr. Blackwood, this is unexpected. Won't take much of your time, Reverend, Elias assures him, remaining near the door rather than advancing into sacred space he doesn't yet feel worthy to claim. Just wanted to inquire about something. Of course, Collins approaches cautiously, maintaining professional courtesy despite evident wariness. Elias chooses his words carefully. Having rehearsed this conversation mentally for weeks, I understand you're planning to visit the Reed homestead. Regarding the boy's situation, Collins studies him with sharpened attention. The council's welfare committee has concerns about proper guardianship, yes. How did you hear about this? Small town, Elias answers simply. People talk. I see. The Reverend's caution increases visibly. And you're interested because... The question demands careful navigation. Elias maintains steady eye contact, demonstrating sobriety and rational thought rather than emotional reactivity. Martha was my wife for 15 years, he states simply. What happened between us was my failing, not hers. I have no claim on her decisions now, but I do have relevant information about her character and capabilities. Collins's expression reveals conflict between professional responsibility and personal judgment of Elias's moral standing to provide character. Reference. The committee's concern centers on the unusual circumstances of Mrs. Blackwood's arrival at the Reed property, he explains carefully, and her lack of legal standing regarding the boy. I understand that, Elias acknowledges. But I also understand Martha's nature better than most. Whatever arrangement brought her there, she'll honor commitments made. The boy couldn't ask for more dedicated care. The statement, simple truth without elaborate justification, carries weight precisely because of its humility. Elias offers observation without attempting to reclaim moral authority he knows remains compromised. Collins considers this perspective with thoughtful attention. Your support for Mrs. Blackwood is unexpected, given your history. My failures don't diminish her capabilities, Elias responds simply. I just thought the committee should have complete information when making their assessment. He turns to leave, having accomplished his purpose without overextending his fragile credibility. At the door, Collins calls after him, "Mr. Blackwood, the council would welcome written statement regarding your perspective. Should you wish to provide it?" Elias nods acknowledgement. Understanding this represents small but significant recognition of his potential contribution despite past disgrace. "I'll prepare something appropriate." Outside, spring sunlight warms his face as Elias checks his compass once more. A new habit reinforcing conscious navigation rather than drifting. The needle points steadily north toward distant mountains, where Martha and Samuel establish their separate lives. Some journeys remain impossible despite newfound direction, but today's small steps represent meaningful progress on his own path, however separate it must remain from those he once claimed as family. Martha stands at the cabin's small window, watching Samuel split firewood with methodical precision. His form has filled out slightly during their months together, regular meals and structured routine gradually restoring what stress and grief had diminished. Though still small for his age, he works with efficiency that compensates for lack of size, positioning each log carefully before striking. Inside, the cabin smells of seed cake baking in the cast-iron stove, a recipe from Martha's childhood using precious sugar saved from their limited stores. The extravagance feels justified given tomorrow's important visitors. She wants the cabin to smell like a home when Reverend Collins and Dr. Mitchell arrive to assess their situation. 5 days of intense preparation have transformed their living space. Walls have been patched, floors scrubbed, Ezra's belongings respectfully organized rather than removed. Samuel's school materials display prominent evidence of continuing education, arithmetic problems, handwritten compositions, carefully drawn maps of local geography. Food stores, once concerning in late winter, now appear adequate with early spring's contributions. Martha's foraging expeditions have yielded wild greens, early mushrooms, and medicinal herbs. Samuel's improved snares consistently provide meat. Their partnership has proven remarkably effective at physical survival. "Smells good," he comments, genuine appreciation brightening his serious features. Like grandfather's birthday celebrations. Martha smiles at this rare voluntary reference to Ezra. Samuel mentions his grandfather infrequently, though she sometimes hears him whispering to the pocket watch he now carries, private conversations with memory that she respectfully never acknowledges. "My mother made this whenever we had company," Martha explains, placing the cake on the windowsill to cool. Said sweet things made even difficult conversations easier. Samuel registers the implication immediately. "You think tomorrow will be difficult?" His perceptiveness, both blessing and burden in one so young, deserves honest response. "It might be." Reverend Collins has particular views on proper arrangements. Samuel absorbs this assessment with characteristic calculation. "Because you're still married to Elias." Martha nods, neither hiding uncomfortable truths nor dwelling unnecessarily on painful topics. Their communication has evolved into this straightforward exchange, accurate information shared without emotional embellishment. "That complicates things legally," she acknowledges, "as does how I came here originally. They think you can't be my guardian because Elias sold you." Samuel states this boldly, his matter-of-fact articulation somehow diminishing its power to wound. "That's stupid! You're here because you chose to stay after grandfather died. You could have left." The observation, insightful in its recognition of her agency beyond initial circumstances, warms Martha unexpectedly. "That's true. I stayed because I wanted to. And I want you to stay," Samuel adds with rare emotional directness. They should consider that too. Martha appreciates his straightforward assessment while recognizing the complexity beyond his understanding. "The council has responsibility to ensure your welfare according to legal standards, not just our preferences." Samuel frowns, processing this administrative perspective against his practical experience. But who knows better what I need? People who've never lived here or us? The question, childlike in its logical simplicity, yet sophisticated in challenging authority structures, exemplifies Samuel's unique blend of innocence and premature wisdom. Martha wishes she could shield him from tomorrow's evaluation while knowing his active participation remains essential to their case. That's partly why they're coming here rather than summoning us to town, she explains. To see our actual situation, not just discuss it abstractly. Samuel nods, shifting immediately to strategic thinking. I'll show Dr. Mitchell my leg. The one I cut last month that you stitched. It's healing better than when he treated my arm last year. Martha smiles at his practical approach to character reference. That would be good evidence of proper care. And I've been practicing my multiplication tables, he continues, warming to their preparation. Reverend Collins always asked math questions to test children's education. His comprehensive consideration of potential challenges reveals how thoroughly this visit has occupied his thoughts. Despite minimal outward discussion, Martha recognizes his apparent calm as carefully constructed facade rather than genuine absence of concern. The seed cake will help too, Samuel adds with sudden childlike enthusiasm, breaking through his serious planning. Nobody makes decisions against people who feed them good things. This simple faith in hospitality's power, perhaps the most age-appropriate observation he's offered all day, touches Martha deeply. She cuts him a slice of still warm cake, watching his face light with simple pleasure as he takes his first bite. Perfect, he pronounces with authority beyond his years. They'll definitely let me stay with you now. Martha wishes adult judgment could indeed be swayed so easily by sweetness and warmth. Tomorrow will bring more complicated assessment of their unusual arrangement, measuring it against community standards and legal requirements beyond their control. For tonight, however, she allows Samuel this moment of optimistic certainty, seed cake and shared purpose, creating temporary fortress against outside judgment. Whatever tomorrow brings, this evening belongs to them alone, guardian and child, bound through circumstance into something that feels increasingly like family despite its unconventional origins. The cake cools on the windowsill, its sweet aroma mingling with wood smoke, and early spring air, scents of hard-won domestic. Tranquility they both silently hope will survive tomorrow's official scrutiny. Reverend Collins and Dr. Mitchell arrive promptly at 10 o'clock, their horses laboring up the final steep approach to the cabin. Martha watches their progress through the window, while Samuel makes final adjustments to their carefully prepared home, straightening already straight books, needlessly sweeping the spotless floor. They're here, Martha announces quietly. Remember what we discussed? Samuel nods, standing straighter and smoothing his clean but worn shirt. Be respectful but honest. Show them I'm well cared for, without seeming rehearsed. Exactly. Martha squeezes his shoulder briefly before opening the door to greet their visitors. Reverend Collins dismounts first, a tall, lean man whose perpetually solemn expression seems carved from the same unyielding wood as the church pews he oversees. He carries a leather document folder stamped with official county seals, its bureaucratic formality incongruous against the mountain backdrop. Dr. Mitchell follows, shorter, rounder, with kind eyes that belie his official capacity today. Martha has always found him more reasonable than Collins, though she harbors no illusions about his ultimate loyalty to community standards. Mrs. Blackwood, Collins acknowledges with careful formality. Thank you for accommodating our visit. We've been expecting you, Martha responds, noting his continued use of her married name despite her circumstances. Please come inside. Samuel stands just within the doorway, his posture conveying respectful attention without subservience. Reverend Collins, Dr. Mitchell. He greets them with perfect mountain politeness. Your horses look tired. I can water them if you'd like. The offer, practical rather than merely ceremonial, earns a approving nod from Mitchell. Thank you, Samuel. That would be helpful. As Samuel attends the horses, Martha invites the men inside, observing their assessment of the cabin's condition. Mitchell notes improvements since his last visit during Ezra's illness, while Collins examines everything with the critical eye of someone seeking problems rather than solutions. "Coffee?" Martha offers, already pouring cups from the prepared pot. "And seed cake if you'd like." Mitchell accepts both gratefully, while Collins takes only coffee, placing his document folder prominently on the table between them, physical reminder of official purpose amid hospitality's softening influence. The council appreciates your cooperation. Collins begins once Samuel returns and all are seated. This visit is simply to assess current arrangements and determine appropriate next steps regarding Samuel's guardianship. The clinical phrasing masks significant power to disrupt their lives. Martha maintains composed exterior while noting how Samuel's hands clench slightly beneath the table. "We understand," she responds evenly. "We've prepared information we hope will be helpful to your assessment." Samuel retrieves his school materials, organized evidence of continuing education despite their isolation. Martha adds medical records she's maintained, including treatments for minor injuries and illness, alongside inventory of food stores and spring planting plans. Dr. Mitchell reviews these materials with genuine interest, asking Samuel relevant questions about his studies and health. The boy responds with natural intelligence and composure beyond his years, neither overly formal nor inappropriately casual. Collins, meanwhile, opens his document folder, extracting official forms whose crisp corners suggest unused bureaucratic machinery rumbling into motion. "While these practical matters are certainly important," he interjects, "our primary concern involves legal standing. Without proper guardianship documentation, this arrangement remains problematic, regardless of material conditions." Martha meets his gaze directly. "Samuel's grandfather entrusted him to my care before passing. We have witnesses to that verbal agreement among neighboring families. Verbal agreements, while meaningful in mountain traditions, lack legal standing," Collins responds with practiced regret that barely masks satisfaction at identifying insurmountable obstacle, "particularly given the unusual circumstances of your arrival here." The delicate reference to her effective purchase months ago hangs awkwardly between them. Samuel straightens, preparing to defend their arrangement before Martha's slight headshake cautions restraint. "I understand legal concerns," she acknowledges calmly. "What options might the council consider appropriate?" Mitchell looks uncomfortable as Collins consults his documents with officious precision. Given Samuel's age and circumstances, temporary placement at Millerville Children's Home, while permanent arrangements are secured, seems most appropriate. The clinical proposal, separation disguised as concern, lands like physical blow. Samuel's face pales slightly, though he maintains remarkable composure. "When would this placement occur?" Martha asks, voice steady despite internal turmoil. "The council has approved removal as early as next week," Collins explains, pushing a form across the table. "This authorizes temporary wardship pending permanent resolution." Martha doesn't touch the document, instead looking toward Dr. Mitchell, whose discomfort has visibly increased. "Doctor, you've known Samuel since birth. Does his current situation appear detrimental to his well-being?" Mitchell shifts uncomfortably, professional assessment warring with bureaucratic loyalty. "The boy appears healthy and well-educated," he acknowledges cautiously. "My concerns are primarily legal rather than medical." "I won't go to Millerville," Samuel states quietly but firmly, breaking his careful silence. "This is my home, my grandfather's land. Martha is taking proper care of me." Collins regards the boy with practiced pastoral patience that doesn't quite conceal condescension. "Your preferences are noted, Samuel, but children don't always understand what arrangements best serve their interests." "I understand enough," Samuel counters with controlled intensity. "I know Millerville separates children from their heritage, forces mountain kids to forget where they come from. Grandfather said it makes orphans twice over, once from family, once from culture. The articulate assessment, clearly channeling Ezra's views, but delivered with Samuel's own conviction, momentarily silences Collins. Martha watches Mitchell's thoughtful reaction, recognizing potential ally in their challenging situation. Perhaps alternatives exist, Mitchell suggests cautiously. The Hendersons have taken in children before. They're respected community members with mountain understanding. Collins frowns at this deviation from predetermined solution. The council has already approved Millerville placement. As one option, Mitchell counters with unexpected firmness. Our responsibility includes considering arrangements that maintain connection to Samuel's heritage while ensuring proper oversight. This small crack in unified authority offers tentative hope. Martha builds on the opening carefully. We welcome community involvement in Samuel's welfare. Regular visits, educational assessment, whatever provides necessary reassurance while maintaining stability in his life. Collins appears ready to dismiss this compromise when unexpected knock interrupts their conversation. All heads turn toward the door as it opens to reveal Henry Matthews from town, looking apologetic for the intrusion. "Pardon, Reverend." "Doc." He nods respectfully before continuing. "Council sent me with additional documentation they thought might be relevant to today's assessment." He extends sealed envelope to Collins, whose frown deepens upon reading its contents. Without explanation, the Reverend passes the papers to Dr. Mitchell, whose eyebrows rise in evident surprise. This certainly introduces new considerations. Mitchell comments, returning the documents to Collins. "Perhaps we should conclude today's initial assessment and reconvene after reviewing this additional information." Collins reluctantly agrees, gathering his materials with poorly concealed irritation. "We'll continue this discussion next week," he informs Martha and Samuel. "Current arrangements may remain in place pending further review." After their visitors depart, Samuel turns to Martha with questioning expression. "What was in those papers?" "I don't know," Martha answers honestly, equally puzzled by the unexpected intervention. "But it seems to have bought us time." Samuel's relief manifests as renewed physical energy. He immediately begins returning the cabin to normal function, removing evidence of their careful staging. "Time is good," he declares with practical optimism. "Grandfather always said problems look different given enough days to consider them." Martha watches him move purposefully around their shared space, his resilience both admirable and heartbreaking. Whatever unexpected reprieve they've received may prove temporary, but for now, their improvised family maintains tentative continuity. Outside, spring sunshine illuminates melting snow and early green. Growth, nature's persistent renewal, continuing regardless of human concerns about proper documentation and legal standing. Henry Matthews rides, alongside Reverend Collins and Dr. Mitchell, until the trail divides, one fork continuing toward town, the other leading to outlying homesteads. At this junction, Henry tips his hat to the officials. "Think I'll pay a visit to the Hendersons before heading back," he explains casually. "Promised the missus I'd check on Sarah's new baby while I was up this way." Collins nods dismissively, mind clearly occupied with the unexpected documents complicating his previously straightforward plan. Mitchell offers more genuine farewell before both officials continue toward town, leaving Henry alone at the crossroads. Once they're out of sight, Henry guides his horse not toward the Hendersons' homestead, but back along the main trail, stopping at a sheltered clearing where Elias Blackwood waits with barely contained impatience. "Well," Elias demands as Henry dismounts. "Did they read it?" Henry nods, loosening his horse's cinch strap to allow the animal brief rest. "Both of them." Mitchell seemed properly surprised. Collins looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Relief crosses Elias's face briefly before concern returns. "And Martha, Samuel, how did they seem?" "Cabin's in good order. Boy looks healthy, speaking up for himself proper. Martha's handling things with dignity, considering the circumstances." Henry studies his friend carefully. "Your letter made quite an impression." Elias shrugs uncomfortably, dismissing praise he feels undeserving of. "Just wrote the truth, nothing more. Truth has power coming from unexpected sources, Henry observes wisely, especially when it contradicts self-interest. The assessment references what both men understand. Elias's written statement supporting Martha's guardianship effectively eliminates any possibility of reclaiming his former marriage. By officially acknowledging her character and capabilities, he has surrendered whatever legal leverage might have existed for reconciliation. Did they say what happens next? Elias asks, redirecting conversation from uncomfortable personal implications. Council will reconvene next week. Your statement forces them to consider options beyond Millerville. Henry hesitates before adding, "You've done a good thing here. Elias won't fix everything, but it's something." Elias nods once, accepting this limited affirmation without overclaiming moral rehabilitation. Should get back to work. Mill's expecting those boundary markers by sundown. The men part ways. Henry continuing toward the Henderson homestead to maintain his cover story, while Elias returns to the forest where half-finished boundary posts await his attention. The physical labor provides welcome distraction from thoughts of the mountain cabin and its occupants, people whose lives continue beyond his direct influence, despite his attempt to assist them from a distance. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, Martha and Samuel resume normal activities with cautious optimism following the official's departure. Though curious about the mysterious documents that seemingly altered their situation, Martha focuses on practical matters, checking early seedlings in the small greenhouse Samuel constructed against the cabin's south wall. Should plant the peas next week, Samuel observes, examining soil temperature with experienced touch. Carrots too, if the ground keeps warming, Martha agrees, noting his deliberate focus on future plans, constructive response to uncertainty about their continued partnership. Throughout the day, they maintain surface normalcy while processing the visit's implications separately. That evening, as Martha prepares dinner, unexpected knock interrupts their quiet routine. Samuel answers cautiously, relaxing when he recognizes Henry Matthews on their doorstep. "Evening, Mrs. Blackwood, Samuel." Henry greets them with casual friendliness that belies his deliberate visit. "Was up checking on the Hendersons' new baby and thought I'd stop by. Hope that's not an imposition." Martha welcomes him with genuine hospitality, appreciating connection to the community below after the official's unsettling presence. "Perfect timing, stew's just ready. There's plenty if you'd care to join us." Henry accepts gratefully, removing his hat and coat before settling at their table. Conversation flows naturally through dinner. Weather prospects, early planting conditions, local news safely distant from their precarious situation. Only after the meal, when Samuel steps outside to complete evening chores, does Henry address the day's events directly. "Thought you might have questions about those papers Collins received," he begins, watching Martha carefully. Her surprise confirms she hasn't connected his arrival with the mysterious documents. "You know what they contained?" Henry nods, choosing words deliberately. "Was asked to deliver them personally. Statement from someone with relevant perspective on your capabilities as Samuel's guardian." Martha's confusion deepens. "Someone spoke on my behalf? Who would—" Understanding dawns mid-question, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "Elias," Henry confirms with slight nod, "wrote formal statement supporting your guardianship. Detailed your character, capabilities, history of responsible behavior despite difficult circumstances." Martha absorbs this unexpected development in silence. After months without contact, Elias has intervened in their lives indirectly but significantly, using what little remaining credibility he possesses to strengthen her position rather than undermine it. Why would he do that? She finally asks, genuine puzzlement rather than suspicion coloring her tone. Henry considers his response, balancing loyalty to his friend against Martha's right to understanding. "Been working steady at the mill. Sober 3 months now, paying old debts, keeping to himself mostly." The information, neutral facts without embellishment, paints picture of man attempting modest reconstruction rather than dramatic redemption. Martha appreciates Henry's straightforward delivery without emotional manipulation. His statement carries particular weight precisely because it contradicts what might be his legal self-interest, Henry explains. Counsel must consider why a husband would support arrangement that essentially confirms permanent separation. Martha understands the strategic value while still processing the personal implications. Did he ask for anything in return? Messages to be delivered? Nothing, Henry assures her. Said only that I should confirm the papers were received and considered. Doesn't expect acknowledgement or gratitude. This final detail, the absence of emotional claims or expectations, perhaps surprises Martha most. The Elias she knew oscillated between neglect and demanding attention. This indirect assistance without strings attached suggests genuine change, however limited. Samuel returns from evening chores, immediately sensing significant conversation interrupted by his arrival. Everything all right? Martha composes herself, offering reassuring smile. Mr. Matthews was just explaining about those papers that seem to help our case today. Good news? Samuel asks with characteristic direct assessment. Potentially helpful, Martha confirms without elaboration. We'll know more next week. Henry takes his cue to depart, thanking them for dinner and hospitality. At the door, he addresses Samuel directly. That greenhouse design is clever work. Your grandfather would be proud of such practical innovation. The simple compliment acknowledging both Samuel's technical skill and Ezra's continued influence brightens the boy's expression momentarily. After Henry's departure, Martha and Samuel complete evening routines in companionable silence, each processing the day's developments privately while finding comfort in shared space and purpose. Later, as Samuel sleeps, Martha sits alone by dying embers, contemplating Elias's unexpected intervention. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but something more complicated, acknowledgement of responsibility without demand for redemptive relationship. His assistance, delivered indirectly through formal channels, respects boundaries while potentially preserving what she and Samuel have built together outside. Spring wind carries promise of changing season across the mountain. Inside, Martha considers that perhaps people, like seasons, occasionally surprise through genuine transformation rather than merely predictable cycles. 1 week passes in careful productivity as Martha and Samuel await the council's decision. Rather than allowing anxiety to paralyze them, they channel energy into spring preparations, tilling garden beds, repairing winter damage to outbuildings, organizing supplies for the season ahead. Their actions demonstrate both practical necessity and symbolic statement. Life continues regardless of administrative determinations. Samuel spends evenings hunched over the small table, writing intently in his composition book by lamplight. When Martha inquires about his project, he merely describes it as important work, his serious expression discouraging further questions. She respects his privacy while noting increased purpose in his demeanor, determination replacing passive waiting. On the morning the council reconvenes, Samuel approaches Martha with the composition book clutched in his hands. I wrote something, he announces, uncharacteristic nervousness evident in his stance. For the council. About why I should stay with you. Martha accepts the offered book, touched by his initiative. Opening to pages filled with careful handwriting, she finds not childish pleading, but methodical argument structured with remarkable sophistication. Samuel has organized his case into clear sections, practical considerations, his knowledge of the property, their established routines, successful management of resources, educational progress, documented learning across multiple subjects, and emotional well-being, stability following grandfather's death, developing sense of security. Most striking is his conclusion, articulate assessment of community responsibility that transcends individual circumstance. A community shows its true character through how it handles difficult situations. The unusual way Martha came to our mountain doesn't change the good she's done since arriving. Sending me to strangers in Millerville might follow rules written on paper, but it ignores wisdom my grandfather believed in, that sometimes the right path doesn't always look like what people expect. Martha looks up from the composition, momentarily speechless at the mature perspective presented in child's handwriting. "Samuel, this is remarkable," he shrugs, uncomfortable with praise despite evident pride in his work. "Just wrote what's true. Thought maybe they should hear from me directly, not just talk about me like I'm not there." Martha recognizes the deeper principle at stake, his desire for agency in decisions affecting his life. "I think they absolutely should hear your perspective. Would you feel comfortable delivering this yourself, if given opportunity?" Samuel considers this responsibility carefully before nodding. "Grandfather always said a man should speak his own truths, not have others do it for him." They prepare for town with particular attention to presentation. Samuel in his cleanest clothes with hair neatly combed, Martha in her best dress with carefully mended seams. The journey downhill feels momentous, filled with silent preparation for whatever awaits in Riverbend's small town hall. Spring has transformed the valley below, trees budding, early flowers emerging, streams swollen with snowmelt. Martha notes how completely the seasons have cycled since her forced departure from this community. She returns now as different woman, no longer passive, participant in circumscribed existence but active creator of chosen. Life. Riverbend shows similar, seasonal renewal as they ride through its awakening streets. Gardens turn freshly tilled soil towards strengthening sun. Buildings display repairs to winter damage. Residents move with energized purpose after months of hibernation. Martha receives varied greetings, some merely polite, others genuinely welcoming, most simply acknowledging her altered status within community. Hierarchy. The town hall's meeting room already holds several community members when they arrive. Evidence of public interest in their unusual situation. Reverend Collins confers quietly with several council members near the front table. Dr. Mitchell notices their arrival first, offering encouraging nod from across the room as they take seats near the back. Martha notices Elias sitting alone in the corner, present but deliberately peripheral to proceedings. Their eyes meet briefly across the space. Acknowledgement without engagement before both redirect attention toward council members taking their places. Mayor Harrison calls the meeting to order with practiced efficiency, addressing preliminary town business before turning attention to the matter of Samuel Reed's guardianship situation. Collins presents formal summary of their home visit, his measured tone barely concealing disappointment at finding inadequate justification for immediate removal. While material conditions appear satisfactory, he concludes reluctantly, legal considerations remain problematic given Mrs. Blackwood's unusual circumstances and lack of formal guardianship documentation. Dr. Mitchell follows with more positive assessment, emphasizing Samuel's evident health and educational progress. The boy demonstrates appropriate development physically, mentally, and emotionally despite challenging circumstances. Disruption of his current environment requires careful consideration of potential negative impacts. Mayor Harrison reviews additional documents, including Elias's statement, now officially entered into record, before addressing Martha directly. "Mrs. Blackwood, do you wish to make statement regarding your position on this matter?" Martha rises, composing her thoughts carefully. "I came to Samuel's home through circumstances none of us would have chosen. But what began as transaction has become genuine commitment to this child's welfare. Commitment I intend to honor regardless of official designation," she continues with practical assessment of their situation, emphasizing established routines, adequate resources, and continuing connections to neighboring families who provide community support. Her presentation focuses on factual reality rather than emotional appeals, respecting the council's obligation to consider objective measures. "Samuel has prepared his own statement," she concludes. "I believe his perspective deserves direct consideration before decisions affecting his future are finalized." Harrison appears momentarily surprised by this suggestion before nodding agreement. Certainly. Samuel, would you like to address the council? The boy approaches with remarkable poise for his age, composition book clutched in slightly trembling hands. His voice starts quietly, but gains strength as he reads his carefully prepared argument. The room falls completely silent, adult attention captured by unexpected eloquence from child, usually spoken about rather than listened to. Samuel concludes by departing from his written text, looking directly at council members. My grandfather taught me that mountain people judge others by actions, not just words or rules. Martha's actions show she's the right person to raise me. Please look at what is, not just what's supposed to be. The simple wisdom, delivered without artifice or manipulation, resonates throughout the room. Several council members exchange glances, reassessing situation through lens Samuel has provided. Mayor Harrison thanks him with genuine respect before opening discussion among council members. Martha and Samuel return to their seats, having presented their case as effectively as possible. Whatever follows now rests with community standards and legal requirements beyond their direct influence. As deliberation continues at the front table, Samuel leans slightly against Martha's shoulder, small gesture of connection regardless of official determination about their relationship's legitimacy. Summer sunlight bathes the cabin in golden afternoon light as Martha works the garden, coaxing life from soil that once seemed unyielding. 3 months have passed since the council's decision, a compromise. Solution crafted through community wisdom rather than rigid bureaucratic enforcement. The arrangement bears hallmarks of mountain pragmatism. Martha maintains primary guardianship of Samuel with oversight from respected community members, regular check-ins from Dr. Mitchell, and continued educational assessment by the school teacher during monthly visits. Not perfect according to official regulations, yet practically functional for all concerned. Martha straightens from her weeding, watching Samuel return from checking trap lines along the eastern ridge. His stride shows growing confidence, frame filling out with proper nutrition and purposeful activity. At nearly 11 now, he navigates the mountain with complete assurance, while gradually allowing himself occasional moments of age-appropriate behavior. Small victories Martha notes without drawing. Attention to them. Good hunting? She calls as he approaches. Samuel holds up 2 rabbits with evident satisfaction. Fat ones too, and I saw deer tracks near the lower creek. Maybe venison soon if we're patient. Their partnership has evolved into comfortable routine, shared responsibilities divided according to ability rather than arbitrary designation. Samuel handles tasks requiring physical stamina and intimate knowledge of the mountain's geography. Martha manages household, garden, and increasingly complex preservation of their improving harvests. Together, they've transformed Ezra's modest homestead into thriving operation, expanded garden beds, repaired outbuildings, carefully managed forest resources. Their survival seems increasingly assured through each season's progression. Letter from town, Samuel mentions, removing folded paper from his pocket. Mr. Abernathy sent it up with the Henderson boy. Martha accepts it curiously. Official correspondence remains infrequent since their status settled into accepted arrangement. Opening it reveals notice from the county clerk regarding property, documentation, bureaucratic formality requiring signatures to finalize, title transfer following Ezra's death and subsequent guardianship. Determination. We need to visit town next week, she explains. Finalize paperwork about the property. Samuel nods, accepting this requirement without concern. Their occasional journeys to Riverbend have grown less fraught with each successful return to their mountain home. The community has gradually accommodated their unusual situation, interaction shifting from awkward tension toward routine acceptance. As Samuel prepares the rabbits for cooking, Martha continues garden work. Reflecting on changes beyond their immediate homestead, Dr. Mitchell reported during his last visit that Elias maintains steady employment at the sawmill, his sobriety now extending beyond 6 months. He's rebuilt his cabin, paid outstanding debts, and established modest but respectable place within community structure. Their paths rarely cross directly. When circumstance brings them into proximity during town visits, they exchange minimal civil acknowledgement before continuing separate journeys. Neither hostility nor false friendliness, simply recognition of lives that once intersected but now progress independently. Martha has made her own connections in Riverbend, exchanging excess garden produce for supplies, contributing herbal remedies to community members, gradually establishing identity beyond Blackwood's. Wife or Reed Boy's guardian, Samuel attends monthly school sessions where his intelligence earns teachers' respect while his practical knowledge occasionally supplements standard lessons. Evening brings cool mountain breeze as they complete daily chores with practiced efficiency. After dinner, Samuel surprises Martha by retrieving small package wrapped in brown paper. "Made something," he announces with uncharacteristic shyness. "For the property paperwork." Martha unwraps it carefully to find hand-carved wooden sign, letters meticulously formed with skill exceeding his years. "Reed and Blackwood. Thought we should make it official," Samuel explains, watching her reaction carefully. "Since you're staying permanently now," the simple declaration, acknowledgement of commitment beyond legal requirement or temporary arrangement, touches Martha deeply. Not adoption in formal sense, but something equally meaningful, mutual claiming of shared identity and purpose. "It's perfect," she responds, genuine emotion coloring her voice. "Where should we place it?" "Made a mailbox too," Samuel reveals with evident pride, "for the main trail entrance, so people know whose place this is." The whose encompasses both of them, equal partners in Homestead, whose origins began with desperation but transformed through choice and commitment into something resembling family. Next morning finds them installing the new mailbox where Mountain Trail meets wider access path. The fresh carved sign gleams with protective oil finish, names clearly visible to anyone approaching their property. Not declarative statement to outside world, but confirmation between themselves, acknowledgement of relationship defying conventional classification, yet functioning with undeniable validity. "Grandfather would approve," Samuel comments as they step back to assess their handiwork. "He always said names matter, tell people what belongs together." Martha nods, understanding significance beyond practical identification. Names connect to lineage, belonging, recognized place within ordered world. Their conjoined surnames represent bridge between past and future, honoring what came before, while establishing foundation for what develops next. As they walk back toward the cabin, Martha notices Samuel unconsciously matching his stride to hers, small physical manifestation of their synchronized partnership. The observation brings quiet satisfaction without need for articulation. Some truths function better demonstrated than discussed. Summer light filters through forest canopy, dappling their path with shifting patterns. Ahead, garden beds display abundant growth while smoke rises from cabin chimney and thin vertical column against clear sky. Evidence of life deliberately cultivated rather than merely endured. Not perfect. Challenges remain in balancing Samuel's need for wider education against mountain isolation, navigating community expectations while maintaining independence, preparing for winter that inevitably follows summer's abundance, yet fundamentally sound, relationship built on mutual respect, shared purpose and genuine commitment, transcending unusual beginnings. Their names displayed together represent not what circumstance forced upon them, but what choice has confirmed between them. "Home for dinner by 6, Samuel confirms as they reach the cabin clearing, already calculating afternoon tasks against remaining daylight. "Home by 6, Martha agrees. The simple exchange, containing layers of established routine and chosen commitment. Home, perhaps the most significant word of all. Not structure, but relationship. Not location, but belonging. The true artifact of their unlikely journey from desperate transaction toward authentic connection.